Chapter 460. As Qin Wentian's finger pressed down, sword qi from all over the heavens converged together. In the air, a sword constellation appeared, enveloping everything below. It was as though Qin Wentian could destroy everything with a single thought. The Qin clan lord, Junyu, and the other ascendants all froze in the air. Their gazes stiffened as they stared at Qin Wentian in the air. The spectators from afar were all stunned. Qin Wentian, who was in the form of a great rock, reverted back to his human form. With a single finger, the sword slayed immortals. Even celestial phenomenon ascendants didn't dare to move. Such power, how can you control it? If you persist any longer, you will die without a doubt. Junyu from the Pill Emperor Hall coldly stared at Qin Wentian. This sword art, even if you borrow the power of the demonic divinity, you won't be able to control it. Junyu was also someone with vast experience. He roamed the vast outside world and had seen countless experts. He had even personally witnessed battles between peak-level celestial phenomenon ascendants. The might of this sword art of Qin Wentian was simply too terrifying. It was as though he was borrowing the might of the heavens. Qin Wentian must have paid the price of exhausting his own body to activate this sword art. If he was the slightest bit careless, he would surely die. In truth, Junyu's conjecture wasn't wrong. The immortal vanquishing swordplay wasn't something Qin Wentian could control. This was only the first stance of the immortal vanquishing swordplay, hence it wasn't difficult to use. But even so, it wasn't something Qin Wentian could control. He had to focus all his energy. If there was the slightest mistake, not only would the immortal vanquishing swordplay vanquish the immortals, he would also die within it. There's no problem at all in killing you. Qin Wentian's silhouette descended. Instantly, the sword might of the heavens moved together with him. Taking another step downwards, Qin Wentian's finger was still pressing down on the air. It was as though that finger of his contained the might of the immortal vanquishing swordplay. His entire focus was focused on that finger. At this moment, Qin Wentian stared at Junyu, causing his countenance to turn incredibly unsightly. He was actually being threatened by a puny little heavenly dipper sovereign. "Kill me. Do you dare?" Junyu coldly spoke. Qin Wentian stepped down again. At this moment, the shadow of the rock on his back seemed to have burned out. The power of the Yuan Fu in his body was being drained, and the power of his bloodline was seeping out. His finger pressed down once more as a towering sword might gushed forth. It was as though an immortal slaying sword had appeared in front of Junyu. The illusory figure of the sword was pointing right at Junyu. "If you dare to move or say another word, I will kill you." As the sound of Qin Wentian's voice faded, killing intent erupted forth, causing Junyu's lips to tremble as he stared at Qin Wentian. His killing intent was incomparably sharp, yet he didn't dare to open his mouth. If Qin Wentian could really control this sword, he would be able to kill him with one strike. What kind of status did Junyu have? Who in Grand Xia would dare to disrespect him? Even the Chen clan's old ancestor or old man Tianji couldn't care less in front of him. However, at this moment, Qin Wentian told him to shut his mouth and not to move an inch. However, Qin Wentian didn't make a move to kill anyone. He seemed to be waiting. He didn't mind exhausting his own strength to control this supreme sword might. He was waiting. From afar, a terrifying energy gushed forth. The people from the Pill Emperor Hall and Qin clan turned their gazes over, only to see a constellation moving in the air. 7 armored figures flew over with great speed, exuding a terrifying aura. Are these puppets? The spectators stared at the 7 silhouettes. In the blink of an eye, they arrived at this location. The 7 puppets stood in the 7 killing positions, and the one in the center was the one in charge of the killing. At this moment, resplendent astral light shone in the air, as though a celestial phenomenon was about to occur. Pang! A terrifying freezing energy gushed forth, with the 7 puppets in the center, the surrounding space was completely frozen. It was as though a gigantic ice statue had appeared, exuding a bone-chilling coldness that caused the spectators from afar to feel a bone-chilling coldness. Astral light erupted as the 7 puppets vanished at the same time, reappearing in front of the Qin clan lord. A resplendent beam of sword light descended from the skies, slashing down. A celestial phenomenon of the sword Tao appeared in the air. Celestial phenomena were actually capable of changing. The countenance of the Qin clan lord turned ashen. He blasted out a palm strike, and in an instant, a gigantic blazing stone tablet appeared before him, circulating with a resplendent glow. The sword slashed down, shattering the stone tablet. The bodies of the 7 puppets seemed to be changing, and every time they changed, the celestial phenomenon in the air would change accordingly. At this moment, a blood-colored constellation appeared. The 7 puppets simultaneously stretched out their hands, manifesting a gigantic blood-colored palm imprint that contained boundless blood might, slamming down from the skies. The countenance of the Qin clan lord paled as he soared up into the air. However, he could feel strands of black-colored mist seeping into his body, causing the circulation of his energy to become sluggish. Poison. The countenance of the Qin clan lord paled. What sort of monsters were these 7 puppets? And at this moment, old man Tianji's eyes gleamed with sharpness. The guardian puppets of the royal tomb. Old man Tianji's eyes gleamed with sharpness. The 7 guardian puppets actually appeared. In that case, didn't that mean that the royal tomb in the ancient kingdom was also excavated? The 3 ascendants of the Pill Emperor Hall could sense that something was wrong. Qin Wentian seemed to have been waiting for the arrival of these 7 puppets. But just when they wanted to move, Qin Wentian's sword might descended upon them. That supreme sword might was already on the verge of breaking apart. But as long as it didn't break apart, it had the strength to slay ascendants. If you guys dare to move, I will kill him immediately. Qin Wentian stared at Junyu as he icily spoke. The 3 ascendants of the Pill Emperor Hall all stood at their original location, not daring to move recklessly. Junyu was the hope of the Pill Emperor Hall. The current situation was something that nobody could have imagined. The 3 ascendants of the Pill Emperor Hall were suppressed by a single Qin Wentian, unable to participate in the battle. Fairy Qingmei and the other 2 were suppressing the Qin clan ancestor. And now, 7 puppets appeared here, suppressing the Qin clan lord. At this moment, the countenances of the experts from the Qin clan not far away turned pale. They no longer had the slightest hint of arrogance on their faces. The Qin clan had already lost one of their ascendants. And now, the Qin clan lord was in a dangerous situation. If another ascendant died, the status of the Qin clan would surely be in jeopardy. Puchi. At this moment, a light sound rang out. Only to see that in the air, a bloody glow could be seen on Qin Wentian's body. His body actually suffered a backlash from the sword qi, causing fresh blood to flow out. This scene caused the eyes of the spectators to narrow. The might of the immortal vanquishing swordplay wasn't something that Qin Wentian could control. He was already on the verge of losing control, and if he suffered another backlash, he might even die at any moment. As long as he willed it, the danger would be resolved. But he didn't. Only to see that Qin Wentian didn't even frown, he was still staring at Junyu. This level of madness, the spectators had already heard of it before. Back then, he dragged the sword for 100,000 miles, splitting apart the Pill Emperor Hall. He had even done such crazy things before. If he were to do it again today, they wouldn't be surprised. Because, his name was Qin Wentian. No one would be able to shake his determination for what he wanted to do. This was courage, this was conviction. Pressing forward with an indomitable will, unshakable. Puchi. Another light sound rang out. Qin Wentian's body seemed to have been penetrated by the sword qi, yet his finger was still pressed in the air. If he didn't move, how would Junyu dare to move? Upon seeing Qin Wentian's decisiveness, the 3 ascendants of the Pill Emperor Hall didn't dare to act recklessly. If Qin Wentian risked his life to kill Junyu, that would be a calamity. This was especially so for the other 2 ascendants of the Pill Emperor Hall, other than Junyu. They had long been traumatized by Qin Wentian. The battle a year ago was still fresh in their minds. In terms of alchemy, the Pill Emperor Hall was unrivaled in Grand Xia. But in terms of combat and other aspects, the Pill Emperor Hall was inferior. At this moment, although the three ascendants of the Pill Emperor Hall could join forces and act against Qin Wentian, it was too risky. They didn't know if they could kill Qin Wentian, and they also didn't know if Qin Wentian would be able to kill Jun Yu or not. Hence, even if they had a 90% chance of victory, the Pill Emperor Hall wouldn't take such a risk. Because, that person was Jun Yu. How could they allow Jun Yu to die here? He was the hope of the Pill Emperor Hall, the future of the Pill Emperor Hall. They would rather face off against Qin Wentian. As for the death of the Chen clan's ascendant, what did it have to do with their Pill Emperor Hall? As long as Jun Yu was safe and sound, everything could start anew. Everyone would first consider their own benefits. Just like the Ouyang ancestor, when they saw Jun Yu's appearance, their alliance with Qin Wentian instantly crumbled. They didn't participate in the battle because of the benefits of the Ouyang aristocrat clan. As for what would happen to Qin Wentian and the others, that was secondary. The Qin clan's clan lord was currently in a dangerous situation. The 7 slaughter puppets floated in the air, radiating a terrifying light as they converged to form a constellation. The countenances of those from the Qin clan were incomparably nervous. These 7 slaughter puppets were too bizarre, they could even change their constellations. The Qin clan lord was already at his limits. Clan lord. Qin Fan stared at the skies, his countenance ashen. He hated the fact that he didn't have the strength of a celestial phenomenon and couldn't participate in this battle. He could only watch from the sidelines. His gaze turned to the old ancestor. The old ancestor seemed to have already sensed the danger on the other side and was frenziedly rushing over. However, Fairy Qingmei and the other 2 ascendants were locked down tightly, causing the old ancestor to have no choice but to use stellar transposition to change his location. Finally, the old ancestor and the Qin clan lord converged, while Fairy Qingmei and the other 2 ascendants joined forces with the 7 slaughter puppets. What the hell is that? Boundless astral light cascaded down from the skies. The sun behind the old ancestor erupted with a terrifying beam of light, shooting towards the 7 slaughter puppets. Ice seal. From within the 7 slaughter puppets, a cold voice rang out. The icebound constellation froze the entire space. Cold underworld. The leader of the Mystic Moon sect was extremely cooperative. Her cold underworld constellation transformed into a domain of ice, turning the entire space into a world of ice. Qi. At the same time, on the other side, a light sound rang out from Qin Wentian's body. His entire body was dyed red with fresh blood, and upon seeing his current condition, the hearts of the spectators pounded rapidly. This was too crazy, was he really not afraid of death? Old man Tianji also stared at Qin Wentian. The determination of this young man was truly unfathomable. Bzzz. Finally, Qin Wentian lifted his arm and pressed down with a single finger. Instantly, the sword might in the air flowed over, as though the entire sky had transformed into sword might, flowing along with his finger. Everything in this world was a sword. As the finger descended, millions upon millions of sword whizzes echoed out. The crowd inclined their heads, staring at the sky with incomparable shock. It was as though the entire sky had transformed into a sword, capable of slaying immortals. Jun Yu's countenance paled, he finally moved. With a wave of his hand, an astral river appeared in the air, severing the space. At this moment, he could clearly feel the threat of death. He had no choice but to take out the life-saving treasure given to him by his master. This sword might not be able to kill him, but he had crippled an incomparably powerful treasure. He had to make Qin Wentian pay the price. Chapter 461. Jun Yu knew that Qin Wentian could only unleash a single sword strike. But the might of this sword strike would be unleashed using the power of the demonic divinity as well as his own strength. After unleashing this sword strike, Qin Wentian would no longer have any way to resist. He would be at the mercy of others. But even so, Jun Yu still chose to use a defensive treasure. The threat of this sword strike was too great, he didn't dare to take the risk. As the treasure was unleashed, the space around him seemed to have been severed. However, Junyu could see a cold smile of disdain flickering in Qin Wentian's eyes. A raging wind gusted by as Qin Wentian's silhouette vanished. That finger strike didn't land completely, it erupted forth towards Junyu. Qin Wentian only had a single sword strike. And this sword strike had no intentions of targeting him, Junyu. That cold smile of disdain caused Junyu's heart to burn with rage. It was as though he had suffered an extreme humiliation. He was someone from the royal sacred sect. He descended to Grand Xia and was toyed with by a junior. That smile of disdain in Qin Wentian's eyes seemed to want to imprint itself into his mind. It was as though that smile was telling him that this sword strike was disdainful to target him. Even if it was disdainful to target him, Qin Wentian still tricked him into wasting a powerful defensive treasure. To Qin Wentian, he only had a single sword strike. Regardless of Junyu's identity, or how powerful his background was, the current Qin Wentian was only at the first level of celestial phenomenon. He wasn't a character who could decide the outcome of this battle. Since he wanted to act, he naturally wanted to kill the person who could decide the outcome of this battle. This person was none other than the Qin ancestor. Without the participation of the Ouyang aristocrat clan and Jiang clan, there was basically no one capable of suppressing the Qin ancestor. He alone needed 3 celestial phenomenon ascendants to contend against him. Only by killing the Qin ancestor would they be able to reverse the situation today. Hence, Qin Wentian had been communicating with Fairy Qingmei and the others through voice transmissions. At the same time when Qin Wentian acted, Fairy Qingmei, the 3 celestial phenomenon ascendants as well as the 7 slaughter puppets also acted against the Qin ancestor, ignoring the Qin clan lord. The 4 of them unleashed their strongest attacks. At this moment, the Qin ancestor was in the center of the 4 attacks. Behind his back, numerous miniature suns manifested, blocking the attacks from all directions. The sun's radiance was so intense that it could even blind the eyes of the onlookers. Too powerful, the Qin ancestor with a cultivation base at the 3rd level of celestial phenomenon is truly powerful. 3 celestial phenomenon ascendants, including Fairy Qingmei in addition to the 7 slaughter puppets, had no way to break through his defense. Many spectators sighed in admiration. But at this moment, in another battlefield, Qin Wentian's sword that was about to slash towards Junyu suddenly slammed down towards the Qin ancestor. The wind and clouds gusted as Qin Wentian's finger descended, transforming into an immortal vanquishing sword. This sword seemed to be formed from the heavens and earth, yet it also seemed to originate from Qin Wentian's body. After this sword was unleashed, Qin Wentian was completely drained of all his strength as his body fell downwards. In order to unleash this sword strike, he had already exhausted the last bit of his strength. In fact, he had even infused his will and conviction into this sword strike. At the instant the sword strike was unleashed, his indomitable determination was swept away. His original body finally couldn't endure it any longer. Like a fallen leaf, he fell powerlessly from the sky. However, at this moment, no one was paying attention to his body anymore. The gazes of everyone were all focused on that sword strike. That sword pierced through the air, bringing forth resplendent flames. It was too fast, so fast that it was inconceivable. The instant Qin Wentian's finger pressed down, the Qin ancestor could already sense that this sword strike was aimed at him. His countenance instantly turned ashen as he roared in rage. Celestial light cascaded down from the heavens as numerous blazing suns descended from the skies, landing in front of him. In that location, the silhouette of a golden crow could be seen. The countenance of the Qin clan's clan lord was similarly unsightly to behold. His powerful palm imprint directly slammed into Fairy Qingmei's back, yet Fairy Qingmei transformed into several incarnations, allowing that towering palm imprint to press down on her. She coughed out a mouthful of blood, yet her body transformed into numerous shadows that rushed towards the Qin ancestor at the same time, all of them slashing out with terrifying killing intent. The leader of the Mystic Moon sect manifested numerous underworld spears that actually fused together, transforming into a terrifying king's spear of darkness that shot out. Right now, Ouyang Guangsheng was in charge of the 7 slaughter puppets. The Thunderfire constellation appeared in the air as his puppet slashed out, unleashing the might of the Thunder God Slash. All the attacks were aimed at the Chen ancestor, exploding out at the same instant, wanting to reap his life away. At this moment, the breathing of the spectators seemed to have halted. It was too fast. Qin Wentian's immortal vanquishing swordplay, as well as the attacks of his constellations, all happened in the time it takes for sparks to fly off a flint. There wasn't even time to think. Rumble. An intense light flashed. The sword was the first to descend, directly piercing through the constellations of suns, aiming for the heart of the Chen ancestor. The body of the Chen ancestor seemed to be on fire as he transformed into the body of a lava giant. His palms were placed in front of his chest as he tried to grab at the incoming sword. Bang, bang. The sword pierced through the palm and stabbed into the chest of the Chen clan elder. It pierced right through and destroyed everything in its path. The Chen ancestor didn't have enough time to react in time. At this moment, the attacks of the other experts arrived one after another. Fairy Qingmei's attack penetrated into his back, while the Thunder God Slash cleaved into his head. The air currents in the air seemed to have stopped flowing. The crowd was suffocating. When they saw this, the Chen clan elder's body moved slightly. After that, the Thunder God Slash exploded. The Chen clan elder raised his head and realized that his head had been split open. No, a furious roar shook the heavens and the earth. Then, his body completely shattered and disappeared from this space. At this moment, everyone was stunned, as if they couldn't believe what they were seeing. The ancestor of the Chen family was killed. As a terrifying existence at the 3rd level of the Ascendant Realm, the Chen ancestor could be considered as one of the few at the peak of Grand Xia. Even the Ouyang ancestor had said that even if they joined forces, none of them would be able to contend against the Chen ancestor. One could very well imagine how much he wanted to fight. But now, Qin Wentian and the others actually joined forces to kill him. This was like a dream. No one dared to believe that this was real. An existence at the peak of Grand Xia had actually died on the battle platform of the Heavenly Fate rankings. Many years later, when people mentioned this day, they would forget that today was the Heavenly Fate rankings. They only knew that this battle was the one where Qin Wang killed a celestial phenomenon, although he had joined forces with others. Not only that, the one he killed was the Chen ancestor, one of the few strongest existences in Grand Xia. In this battle, although Qin Wentian had slashed out that fatal sword strike, Fairy Qingmei's contributions couldn't go unnoticed. If it weren't for her shadow glamour constellation, even if the 3 of them joined forces, they wouldn't be able to hold back the Chen ancestor. Who? Someone in the crowd heaved a sigh of relief. Fairy Qingmei coughed out a mouthful of fresh blood. Evidently, she was also injured from that earlier attack. However, those from the Chen clan still hadn't recovered from their shock. They stared dumbfoundedly at the scene before them. Even the clan leader of the Chen clan was dumbfounded. The ancestor has fallen. Was this true? The death of the Chen ancestor indicated that the decline of the Chen clan was already unstoppable. In fact, there was even the threat of annihilation. Not long ago, the great solar Chen clan of Ginkgo was at the peak of their power. Each and every one of them had an intense pride in their hearts, and looked down on Qin Wentian and the others. But at this moment, their hearts were trembling, as though they were filled with fear. No matter how many talented demon-level geniuses the Chen clan had, or how many powerful Heavenly Dipper sovereigns they had, without the protection of a top-tier power, they would become incomparably weak. This was especially so since they were one of the 9 grand clans of Grand Xia. Without the protection of a top-tier power, how many people would covet the wealth they had once offended? No, Qin Fan murmured, shaking his head. Ignoring everything else, just the 3 Saint Royal medallions that the Qin clan had acquired during the past 100 years were things that no one would ever let go of. The death of the Qin family ancestor was no longer a simple matter of his own death. It was a calamity that had befallen the entire great solar Qin family. Even if Qin Wentian died today, the Chens would not be able to escape. Moreover, the crisis of the Chens was far from over. Leave, leave. The clan lord of the Chen clan abruptly roared, telling the others to leave as well. They couldn't stay here any longer. Freeze. The controller of the 7 slaughter puppets had already changed. Earlier, it was Ouyang Guangsheng, and now, it was Yun Mengyi. The battle had yet to end. The silhouettes of the 2 ascendants from the Mystic Moon sect flickered, instantly dashing towards the Chen clan lord. The Chen clan lord had already been injured in the earlier battle, and was almost killed by the 7 slaughter puppets. Now that he was surrounded once again, he didn't even have the time to breathe. Since they had already killed the Chen ancestor, they might as well finish off all the ascendants of the great solar Chen clan in one go. However, on the other side, Qin Wentian's plummeting body was caught by a snow-white demonic beast. This demonic beast was none other than Little Rascal. Currently, it had a gigantic body, and it carried Qin Wentian as it turned and fled. How could Junyu spare Qin Wentian? Not long ago, that look of disdain in Qin Wentian's eyes, as well as that fake sword strike, had ruthlessly humiliated him, even causing him to waste a defensive treasure. Now, Qin Wentian had already exhausted all of his energy. Did he still want to flee? Qin Wentian had actually cultivated the immortal vanquishing swordplay. There must be a huge secret on him, and this was something Junyu had to know. Junyu grabbed out with his palm, and Little Rascal's body seemed to be locked in place. It wanted to struggle, but how could it break free? After all, it was only a weak heavenly dipper demonic beast. In front of Junyu, who was at the celestial phenomenon realm, it was simply too weak. Junyu merely grabbed out with his hand and it was already immobilized. Bzzz. Astral light flashed as the 7 slaughter puppets appeared in front of Qin Wentian, protecting him. The 7 slaughter puppets had telepathy linked, and after using the freeze technique, their first thought was to save Qin Wentian. Hence, they executed stellar transposition and stood in front of Junyu. Chapter 462. At this moment, Qin Wentian was the one in charge of killing the 7 slaughter puppet. His will of mandates and astral energy erupted forth as 7 beams of light shot up into the skies. The 7 of them were connected telepathically, while the others did their best to coordinate with him. In the air, a terrifying whistling sound of swords rang out. A resplendent celestial body manifested in the air, resembling an illusory celestial body. In this illusory scene, the humming of swords could be heard, as well as a towering pressure. Do you think you can block me? Junyu's voice was ice cold as he stepped out. He similarly released his own constellation as a tyrannical sealing might permeated the entire space. Go capture him. Junyu commanded. The 2 ascendants beside him acted at the same time, rushing forward. Junyu pointed his finger in the air as the might of his constellation shone, causing the entire space to tremble, as though it was being sealed by a terrifying sealing force. Open! The 7 slaughter puppets slashed out with a sword, as though it wanted to break apart this space. At the same time, beside Qin Wentian, who was quietly lying on Little Rascal's body, a beautiful silhouette appeared. She carried Qin Wentian in her arms as spatial energy radiated from her as she rapidly retreated. Where do you think you're going? Junyu coldly snorted. In the air, a pair of gigantic palm imprints that could imprison everything manifested. That palm imprint slammed down, causing the entire space to be locked down. Qing'er found it hard to move. Her eyes flashed with coldness as she stared at Junyu. That frosty gaze of hers actually caused Junyu to involuntarily frown. This woman was very beautiful, but also very cold. The other 2 ascendants from the Pill Emperor Hall had already rushed over, instantly surrounding Qing'er and Qin Wentian, not allowing them to leave. On the other side of the battlefield, the battle had already concluded. Fairy Qingmei, the leader of the Mystic Moon sect as well as the old granny from the Mystic Moon sect, 3 ascendants against a first-level ascendant of the Great Solar Chen clan. In addition to the fact that the 7 slaughter puppet had heavily injured the Great Solar Chen clan earlier, there was no suspense in the outcome of this battle. An instant later, the clan lord of the Great Solar Chen clan, a powerful celestial phenomenon ascendant, was captured by Fairy Qingmei. After which, the long spear of the leader of the mystic moon sect pierced through his head, nailing him to death. The death of the head of the Qin clan officially symbolized the fall of a dominant force in the Great Xia dynasty. Moreover, the Qin clan, one of the 9 Grand Dukes of the Great Xia dynasty and one of the top 5 powerful clans in the entire Great Xia dynasty, was now heading towards destruction. The 3 celestial phenomenon ascendants of the Great Solar Qin clan had all died. If this had been said a day ago, everyone would have taken it as a joke. However, the winds and clouds of the world were constantly changing. Just a moment ago, they were still able to intimidate the forces of Great Xia, but in the blink of an eye, they were heading towards their doomsday. The other members of the Qin clan were stunned. In fact, some of them even wanted to escape. But just as they were about to escape, they discovered that many masked figures had suddenly appeared in the distance, sealing off their path of retreat. Be it the void or the ground, they were all sealed off. These people had been hiding amongst the crowd, spectators of the heavenly fate rankings. Nobody knew who they were, but all of a sudden, their faces were covered with ice-cold masks as they appeared in the air. However, Fairy Qingmei and the leader of the Mystic Moon sect didn't have the time to care about these people from the Qin clan. They instantly sped towards Qin Wentian, only to see Qin Wentian and Qing being suppressed by the 2 celestial phenomenon ascendants of the Pill Emperor Hall. You dare to touch them? Fairy Qingmei's voice was ice-cold. Her phantom constellation appeared, and at the same time, the 2 ascendants from the Mystic Moon sect also released their constellations. The Pill Emperor indifferently glanced at Fairy Qingmei before walking to the side of Qin Wentian. Everything today can end here. The Qin clan was destroyed, but it had nothing to do with them. In fact, it was beneficial to the Pill Emperor Hall. With one less powerful Great Solar Qin clan, the rise of the Pill Emperor Hall would be even more unstoppable. Qin Wentian had also fallen into their hands. Today's battle could be concluded with a perfect ending. However, at this moment, Qing placed Qin Wentian's body down and placed it on Little Rascal's back. Her silhouette then stepped out, moving towards the center of the 2 celestial phenomenon ascendants. Michem. The Pill Emperor frowned as killing intent gushed forth from him. This woman had once appeared in the Pill Emperor Hall before. Today, when Qin Wentian's life was in danger, she actually appeared again. If you dare to touch her, I guarantee that even the Royal Sacred Sect wouldn't be able to protect your Pill Emperor Hall, let alone Junyu. Fairy Qingmei coldly spoke, her words causing the Pill Emperor Hall to frown as he stared at her. Are you trying to scare me? What sort of power was the Royal Sacred Sect? Did Fairy Qingmei mean that this woman had a background comparable to the Royal Sacred Sect? Yes, I'm scaring you. You can try. Fairy Qingmei coldly spoke, her words causing the Pill Emperor to narrow his eyes as he stared at Qing. However, he only saw that Qing didn't even bother with him, walking past him without even glancing at him. Such arrogance caused his gaze to freeze, and when he thought back to the background of Qin Wentian, the Pill Emperor's heart couldn't help but waver. This woman was extraordinary, yet she was so arrogant. Could it be that she had a tyrannical background? In truth, how could Qing be arrogant? It was just that her personality was as cold as ice, and it wasn't intentional at all. This caused the Pill Emperor to feel trepidation. His gaze then turned to Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian was still in their hands. If this woman wanted to leave, so be it. Given her little bit of strength, she wouldn't be able to change the situation today. Only to see that Qing actually walked towards the 7 slaughter puppets. Within the 7 slaughter puppets, the silhouette of a young man walked out. This young man was none other than Qin Wentian, who had transformed into Tian. This scene caused the eyes of the crowd to narrow. These 7 slaughter puppets were actually controlled by them? In that case, could it be that there were other people in the other 6 puppets as well? Qing stepped into the 7 slaughter puppets, exchanging positions with Tian. Purposely acting mysterious. Get out of my way. Today, My Pill Emperor Hall has to bring this man away. The Pill Emperor walked to the side of Qin Wentian. Little rascal howled at him, only to see the Pill Emperor coldly laughing. Sweeping his gaze over, he grabbed out with his palm, and an instant later, a gigantic palm imprint latched onto Qin Wentian's body, lifting him up. Fairy Qing Mei and the rest were still standing guard. How could they possibly allow the Pill Emperor to bring Qin Wentian away? You guys only have 4 ascendants. Without that sword strike earlier, you guys wouldn't even be able to deal with those from the great Solar Qin clan. Wanting to obstruct us now is nothing but a pipe dream. If we fight, although we might be delayed for a moment, we would still be able to retreat safely. As for this Qin Wentian, it wouldn't be my fault if he falls here. The Pill Emperor coldly threatened. At this moment, an intense spatial energy gushed forth. After Qing controlled the 7 slaughter puppets, the constellations in the air radiated a fearsome spatial energy. Numerous spatial barriers appeared, sealing this entire space. In addition to Fairy Qingmei's phantom constellation, even if these people wanted to break through, they would still need some time. My name is Di Tian. At this moment, a voice abruptly rang out. The Pill Emperor, Junyu, and the rest frowned as they stared in the direction of Di Tian. He stood in the center of the 7 slaughter puppets, tightly guarded. The Pill Emperor and Junyu were both taken aback. The person who spoke at this moment was actually this person. Di from the Azure Emperor. Right now, the Di clan isn't merely controlled by Qin Wentian, it's controlled by me and him together. The innate techniques I know, Qin Wentian knows them as well. Di Tian slowly spoke, and the innate techniques that Qin Wentian knows, Di Tian, know them as well. Junyu, do you want to die? Di Tian inclined his head, staring at Junyu. His countenance was akin to a terrifying sword, capable of penetrating through everything. Junyu frowned as his killing intent flickered. These words were spoken to him by Qin Wentian not long ago. And now, this person actually dared to threaten him once again. Chant of the demonic divinities, ancient will connecting the heavens. Gathering demonic chi from the 8 directions, devouring the astral energy of the starry skies, connecting the power of the demonic divinities in the 8 directions. Di Tian murmured in a low voice. That drawn-out voice seemed to be resonating with the heavens and earth. In an instant, a terrifying surge of energy rocked the area as the demonic chi from heaven and earth gathered towards Di Tian. Demonic divinity sacrificial transformation. The countenance of the Pill Emperor stiffened. He was all too familiar with this technique. Back then, he had personally witnessed Qin Wentian using it. And now, what Di Tian was using, was none other than the demonic divinity sacrificial transformation. He said that Qin Wentian knew it, and so did he. He knew the demonic divinity sacrificial transformation. In that case, he knew the immortal vanquishing swordplay as well. As they thought of this, the hearts of the Pill Emperor, Junyu, and the other 2 ascendants shuddered as they stared at Di Tian, their eyes flashing with a terrifying sharpness. Once the demonic divinity is activated, if I transform into a demon, I will definitely use the immortal vanquishing swordplay. At that time, Qin Wentian might die, but Junyu, you will have to accompany him in death. Di Tian slowly spoke, his words causing the hearts of the Pill Emperor and Junyu to tremble as their countenances turned incomparably unsightly to behold. I don't believe that you know this sword art. Junyu's countenance was incredibly ugly to behold. After I kill you, I will flee to a faraway place. Let alone the fact that you are merely a disciple of a mere district elder, even if you are a direct descendant of the sage sect, so what? Do you want to gamble? Di Tian's voice was ice-cold, as a terrifying ancient will gushed forth. The power of the demonic divinities from the 8 directions wasn't obstructed by the spatial energy, nor was the astral energy in the sky. The demonic chi radiating from him grew more and more terrifying. If I transform into a demon, I won't rest until I kill you. You still have 5 breaths of time left. Di Tian stared at Junyu. Every word he spoke caused Junyu's countenance to turn even more unsightly. The demonic chi grew more and more terrifying. His ancient will pierced through the heavens as the power of the demonic divinities from the 8 directions converged on him. Once he sacrificed himself, only the immortal vanquishing swordplay would be able to resolve it. At that time, that sword would definitely slash him. Junyu. Release him. Junyu's countenance turned ashen as he roared. The countenances of the Pill Emperor and Qin Wendian were similarly unsightly to behold. With a wave of their hands, they flung Qin Wendian's body out of the way. Momentarily, Fairy Qingmei's silhouette flickered as she appeared in front of Qin Wendian, catching Qin Wendian's body. After which, they moved away from each other. Unless Di Tian transformed into a demon again and slayed Junyu, the strength of both sides were equal. But if they did that, the price they had to pay would be too great. Qin Wendian was already heavily injured. Di Tian had to take control of the situation. This matter isn't over yet. Junyu retreated as well. The spatial energy in the area dissipated, allowing him to leave this space. The danger today had already been resolved. 3 ascendants from the great Solar Qin clan had fallen, and although Qin Wendian was heavily injured, this result was already enough to make him feel gratified. Chapter 463. Since the experts from the Pill Emperor Hall had left, they had no choice but to leave as well. Initially, they thought that once they captured Qin Wendian, the curtains would fall on this battle. But who would have thought that another Di Tian would appear? This person was actually from the same faction as Qin Wendian. Not only that, the two of them had an extremely close relationship, sharing the innate techniques they cultivated. Most probably, this Di Tian had always been hiding in the shadows, waiting for Qin Wendian to transform into a primordial great rock before he appeared to take control of the situation. In the face of Di Tian's threat, Junyu didn't dare to gamble. He could only choose to leave. But today, he came here in glory, yet he was repeatedly threatened and humiliated. Everyone understood that given Junyu's status, there was no way he would let this matter rest. Although Qin Wendian and the others had temporarily passed through the crisis, but just like what Junyu had said before he left, this matter wasn't concluded yet. He would never give up just like that. Staring at the silhouettes in the air, the spectators couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. Who would have thought that Qin Wendian and the others would actually succeed in resolving the crisis? Not only that, they even managed to annihilate the great Solar Qin clan. Such an achievement was sufficient to shock the entire Grand Xia. That single sword strike that changed the situation had also caused Qin Wendian to fall into a coma. No one knew if his life would be in danger or not. Back then, Qin Wendian transformed into a primordial great rock and split apart the Pill Emperor Hall. And now, the primordial great rock had transformed into a human and annihilated the great Solar Qin clan. At this moment, the hearts of the spectators couldn't help but lament. If Qin Wendian hadn't died, what sort of accomplishments would he have reached? If he was given tens of years, there would be no one in Grand Xia who would be able to stop him. Also, what was going on with those 7 puppets? Why did they appear here? At this moment, more and more puppets walked out. Other than the beautiful Qing, the appearance of the other 6 caused the hearts of the spectators to tremble violently. They were actually the most outstanding characters in the Heavenly Fate rankings 3 years ago. Qin Zheng, Yun Mengyi, Ouyang Guangsheng, Fan Lu, Chu Mang and Mu Feng. Even Mu Feng had participated in the battle to save Qin Wendian. Guangsheng. The countenance of the Ouyang ancestors stiffened. Ouyang Guangsheng was actually controlling one of the 7 puppets. In another direction, when the experts of the Qin clan saw the experts from the Pill Emperor Hall leaving, their countenances turned ashen. The celestial phenomenon ascendance of the Pill Emperor Hall had ended. The Pill Emperor Hall was finished. Qin clan. The silhouette of the mystic moon sect's leader flickered as she instantly sped over. The terrifying cold underworld constellation enveloped the entire space, exuding an intense killing intent that struck fear in the hearts of everyone. The experts of the Qin clan all raised their heads, looking at the leader of the mystic moon sect in the air. Their faces were all deathly pale as fear spread from the depths of their hearts. Chen Fan stood there was no longer that arrogant attitude he had before. He stared at the leader of the Mystic Moon sect in the air, an indescribable feeling in his heart. To think that the Pill Emperor Hall that was incomparably powerful not too long ago would now be trampled on by others. Is this the will of the heavens? Chen Fan looked up at the sky and murmured. The leader of the Mystic Moon sect waved her hand, and in an instant, numerous cold underworld spears shot out, causing piercing sounds to ring out. Everywhere the spears passed, the experts of the Chen clan all died. The Chen clan brought this upon themselves. How can there be fate? Qin Wentian, who was in the form of Di Tian, didn't activate the demonic divinity sacrificial transformation. At the last moment, Junyu gave up on the idea of transforming into a demon. At this moment, he walked to the side of the leader of the Mystic Moon sect and stared down at Chen Fan with a cold expression on his face. When the Chen clan was at the peak of their power, they were arrogant and cruel, thinking that no one would be able to deal with your Chen clan. If it wasn't for the Chen clan's coercion, why would he, Qin Wentian, lead his men here? Why would he activate the immortal vanquishing swordplay? Chen Fan's heart was filled with sorrow. Not long ago, he was still looking down on the people in front of him. At that time, how powerful was the Chen clan? They could do whatever they wanted without any fear. But who would have thought that retribution would come so quickly? I want to kill him personally. A voice drifted over. Qin Wentian turned his head and saw Bai Qing. Bai Qing was the person who felt the most pain in the Mystic Moon sect's heart. Because the person who was tortured to death by the Chen clan was her master, someone she viewed as her own parents. At this moment, a terrifying killing intent radiated from her as she stared at Chen Fan. Fine, this person should have a sacred royal medallion on him. If he dies, Bai Qing, take the medallion with you. The leader of the Mystic Moon sect spoke. After which, she pressed her palms downwards as a surge of underworld energy gushed into Chen Fan's body, causing him to groan in misery as his body trembled violently and he coughed out a mouthful of blood. I'm not willing to die like this. Chen Fan inclined his head and roared in anger. Devil might gushed forth as Bai Qing descended from the air. A devil saber appeared in her hands, and the entire space around her seemed to be filled with devil might. Her eyes were bloodshot as she walked towards Chen Fan. Master, disciple is useless and has implicated you. I can only kill my enemy with my own hands, to avenge you. As the sound of her voice faded, Bai Qing's devil saber slashed down with terrifying devil might. Flee! Below, the members of the Chen clan roared as they fled in different directions. The spectators from afar all knew that the Chen clan was finished. After this battle, out of the 36 transcendent powers of Grand Xia, only 34 would remain. The Great Solar Chen clan and the 9 Mystical Palace were both destroyed because of Qin Wentian. They were no longer part of Grand Xia. Wentian Gij. After Bai Qing killed Chen Fan, she retracted her devil might. Her silhouette flickered as she sped towards Qin Wentian who was beside Fairy Qingmei. At this moment, Qin Wentian was still in the embrace of that supreme beauty, and was still unconscious. Qing noticed Bai Qing's arrival. She inclined her head and glanced at Bai Qing. Her countenance was still cold as she softly stated, he won't die. Thank you, Bai Qing spoke to Qing her words causing Qing Er's eyelashes to flutter, but she didn't say anything. Let me take a look. A voice drifted over. Old man Tianji had actually arrived here, his gaze landing on Qin Wentian. This demonic star of Grand Xia only used a few short years to slowly change the entire structure of Grand Xia. Qing coldly stared at old man Tianji, hugging Qin Wentian without moving. Her actions caused old man Tianji to shake his head with a bitter smile on his face. This female was definitely not an ordinary person. This demonic star of Grand Xia was truly lucky, to have so many outstanding beauties worrying for him. The energy in his body has already dissipated, there's not even a single strand of astral energy left. Now that he's unconscious, it's naturally impossible for him to cultivate. His resistance is also very weak. He needs to use some medicine to stimulate his body, allowing him to absorb more astral energy before he can recover. Old man Tianji faintly stated. He had personally witnessed that sword strike. The immortal vanquishing swordplay was too powerful, but it was also too dangerous. Qin Wentian had never seen a stellar martial cultivator at the heavenly dipper realm being drained so cleanly, with not even the slightest bit remaining. Qin Wentian had no idea how Qin Wentian managed to endure until the very last moment. Most probably, not only was Qin Wentian's astral energy depleted, even his essence, qi, and spirit were drained dry. Even the power of his bloodline was weakened. Fairy Qingmei nodded her head lightly. Thank you for your guidance. Qingmei, that battle of the Azure Emperor back then has already happened far too long ago. Many people no longer care about external affairs. Don't be too stubborn or it would be extremely difficult for you all to survive in Grand Xia. Old man Tianji turned his gaze onto Fairy Qingmei as he advised. I know what I'm doing. Qingmei nodded her head lightly. Old man Tianji didn't say anything more. The Venerate Heavens sect had never interfered with external affairs. In addition to the fact that they were extremely powerful, even though the winds and clouds of Grand Xia had changed, their position had never wavered. At this moment, the silhouette of the Ouyang ancestor flickered as he spoke. Qingmei, Di Tian and Guangsheng, you all should know that I didn't intend to withdraw from Grand Xia today. It's just that since my Ouyang aristocrat clan has established itself in Grand Xia, there are some people we cannot afford to offend. I know, there's no need for you to explain anything to us. Fairy Qingmei coldly replied. The leader of the Mystic Moon sect also turned her gaze over as she added, that's right, the Ouyang aristocrat clan has their own standpoint, we are very clear about this. However, I hope that although the secret arts of Grand Xia have already been bestowed to you all, the Ouyang ancestor and the other members of the Ouyang aristocrat clan would still choose not to cultivate them. If not, it wouldn't be good for them to just take the treasures of others. The leader of the Mystic Moon sect clearly felt resentment in her heart. Although the dust had already settled for the battle today, only they themselves knew how dangerous it was. If it wasn't for that sword strike from Qin Wentian, the Qin ancestor wouldn't have died. If the Qin ancestor didn't die, the ones who would be annihilated in the end would be those of the Mystic Moon sect and Qin Wentian, not the great Solar Qin clan. The Ouyang aristocrat clan and the Jiang clan were the core powers of the Ouyang aristocrat clan. Their decision to withdraw at the last moment almost caused the deaths of the members of the Mystic Moon sect and Qin Wentian. Although the Ouyang ancestor had his own considerations, it was impossible for the leader of the Mystic Moon sect to not feel resentment. Since the leader of the Ouyang aristocrat clan was acting on behalf of the Ouyang aristocrat clan, she naturally wouldn't view him as an enemy. But at the very least, the Ouyang aristocrat clan couldn't cultivate the secret arts of Grand Xia. If not, it would be a loss of their status. That's right, this is what I wanted to say as well. Fairy Qingmei coldly replied. The Ouyang ancestor didn't reply. He turned his gaze onto Ouyang Guangsheng as he asked, where did this puppet come from? It's not mine. Ouyang Guangsheng replied, his words causing unhappiness to flicker in the eyes of the Ouyang ancestor. It was normal for Fairy Qingmei and the leader of the Mystic Moon sect to be angry, but Ouyang Guangsheng was only a junior of the Ouyang aristocrat clan. Guangsheng, how can you speak to the ancestor in such a manner? The Ouyang ancestor walked over, berating Ouyang Guangsheng. Clan Lord, in the future, I will head out to temper myself. There's no need for the clan to worry about me. Ouyang Guangsheng spoke, his words causing the Ouyang clan lord to berate, impudent. Do you think the matter today will end like this? June, you will definitely not let this matter rest so easily. Forget about what you did before. Now, you should return to the Ouyang clan and get married as soon as possible. I will walk my own path, it has nothing to do with the clan. The Ouyang ancestor's gaze was resolute as he stared at the Ouyang ancestor. As for marriage, if Ting Er is willing to follow me out to temper myself, I will give her an explanation in the future. If she isn't willing and wants to stay in the Jiang clan, I will head to the Jiang clan to marry her. You. The Ouyang clan lord was infuriated, only to see the Ouyang ancestor waving his hands, interrupting him, "Let him be." "Humph," the Ouyang clan lord coldly snorted, his countenance extremely unsightly to behold. This fellow was pampered by the Ouyang clan, becoming more and more lawless, not putting the elders in his eyes at all. "Hee hee." Old man Tianji laughed. He turned his gaze onto Yun Mengyi and the others, before shifting his gaze in the direction of the ancient kingdom of Grand Xia. "The royal tomb has appeared, right?" Chapter 464. Royal Tomb. As the sound of old man Tianji's voice faded, the entire space froze as the hearts of the spectators trembled. The royal tomb appeared. The royal tomb of the Grand Xia Empire only existed in the legends. Ever since the ancient kingdom of Grand Xia was destroyed, there was no other ancient kingdom that could unify Grand Xia. Hence, the royal tomb naturally referred to the royal tomb of the ancient kingdom. That was the place where the ancient emperor of Grand Xia was buried. However, even before the ancient kingdom was destroyed, no one knew where the royal tomb was located. It only existed in the legends. Everyone knew that the royal tomb existed, but no one knew where it was located. Only those from the royal clan of Grand Xia knew the location of the royal tomb, as well as the method to open it. And now, old man Tianji actually said that the royal tomb had appeared. The eyes of the Ouyang ancestor and the rest all gleamed with sharpness. Following the gaze of old man Tianji, they stared in the direction of the ancient kingdom. Ouyang Guangsheng and the rest rode on 7 tyrannical puppets, their combat prowess comparable to celestial phenomenon ascendants. Could it really be the royal tomb? These 7 puppets should all be 5th ranked. If they were controlled by celestial phenomenon ascendants, the power of the 7 slaughter puppets would be raised by countless times. However, it requires the 7 of you to be of one mind. It's truly rare for the 7 of you to be able to control the 7 slaughter puppets at the same time. Old man Tianji glanced at Di Tian and the rest. The 7 slaughter puppets, 7 of them being of one mind. Bzzz, a raging wind gusted by as the Ouyang ancestor abruptly departed. "Members of the Ouyang aristocrat clan, follow me." As the sound of his voice faded, the members of the Ouyang aristocrat clan all soared up into the air, flying in the direction of the ancient kingdom. Old man Tianji lightly shook his head. Yun Mengyi calmly glanced at the departing silhouettes as she stated, "This Ouyang ancestor is truly crafty, as expected of an old monster that has lived for thousands of years." However, the royal tomb of Grand Xia isn't a place that can be casually entered. 9 out of 10 people will die. The outcome is unknown. For the unknown, if one's luck is strong, they will survive. If one's luck is weak, they will perish. Old man Tianji smiled as he stared at Yun Mengyi. "If there's a descendant of the royal clan leading the way, I'm afraid the result would be completely different. Maybe, 10 out of 10 would lead to 10 lives." Yun Mengyi glanced at the unconscious Qin Wentian. What a pity. It seemed like Qin Wentian had no fate with the royal tomb. Today was the best chance for them to enter the royal tomb. If they missed this chance, the other transcendent powers would definitely send their experts over to explore the royal tomb. At that time, it would be impossible for them to enter even if they wanted to. "Hurry up, let's go." Yun Mengyi's silhouette flickered. The countenances of Ouyang Guangsheng, Chu Mang and the rest flickered as they soared up into the air, flying in the direction of the ancient kingdom. The Di Tian that Qin Wentian had transformed into naturally moved forward without hesitation. Although one of his bodies had fallen into an extremely dangerous situation, he still had another body that was completely unscathed. Naturally, he could explore the secrets of the imperial mausoleum. If one of them entered the royal tomb and obtained benefits, both of them would naturally be able to benefit as well. This was the heaven-defying aspect of the Great Nirvana immortal art. The Great Nirvana immortal art allowed the 2 bodies to walk different paths and cultivate at the same time. But during the process, the insights gained by the 2 of them could be shared. The insights gained by the other would also be transferred to the other person. "Bai Qing, you come as well." Di Tian turned his head and spoke to Bai Qing. Yes, Bai Qing, you go as well. The leader of the Mystic Moon sect stared at Bai Qing. Bai Qing glanced at the unconscious Qin Wentian only to hear Qing saying in a low voice, I will take care of him. Thank you. Bai Qing expressed her thanks again. After which, her silhouette flickered as she soared through the air as well. At this moment, the great solar Qin clan in Ginkgo had already been destroyed. Fairy Qingmei and the leader of the Mystic Moon sect stood together as the leader of the Mystic Moon sect spoke, although we won the battle today by luck, the road ahead will be filled with dangers. In the future, in Grand Xia, we will be targeted by many transcendent powers. The Pale Emperor Hall, Hua clan and Wang clan will definitely not spare us. Qin Wentian has no intentions of establishing a sect in Grand Xia immediately. The Azure faction always wore masks when they appeared in the world, nobody would know of their identities. Given how vast Grand Xia is, who would be able to find them? Fairy Qingmei casually stated. Grand Xia was simply too vast, it was impossible to find them one by one. The Pale Emperor Hall wouldn't waste so much time either. They would only target the most important characters, like her, Fairy Qingmei, or Qin Wentian. But the Mystic Moon sect will definitely be in danger in the future. Fairy Qingmei spoke in a low voice. The leader of the Mystic Moon sect nodded her head. Since our sect is located in the Spirit Continent, it's easy for us to become the target of public criticism. Qingmei, I intend to do the same as you, allowing the Mystic Moon sect to roam Grand Xia without revealing our identities. How about we form an alliance? That would naturally be for the best. A smile appeared on Fairy Qingmei's face as she continued, this power was originally controlled by Qin Wentian. As for the Mystic Moon sect, I can see that you also have the intention to entrust it to Bai Qing. Given the relationship between the two of them, they are already willing to die for each other. There's no need for me to say anything more. If our two powers form an alliance, there might even be a chance for us to merge in the future. A rare smile appeared on the face of the leader of the Mystic Moon sect when she heard the hidden meaning behind Fairy Qingmei's words. Or maybe, in the future, there will only be a single power in Grand Xia. Fairy Qingmei's eyes flashed with sharpness when she heard this. How could she not have thought of this before? It was just that at this moment, it was still too early. The Qin clan of Ginkgo was an ancient aristocrat clan that occupied a vast and boundless territory. For thousands of years, they had always stood at the peak of Grand Xia, and were one of the strongest powers in Grand Xia. Every day, there would be countless people wanting to join the Qin clan. However, at this moment, in the surroundings of the Qin clan, several silhouettes were staring at them. In the air, a black-robed old granny exuded a towering killing intent as she led the experts from the Mystic Moon sect over. The majority of the Qin clan members had already fled upon hearing the news, but the fortune left behind by the Qin clan was already destined to be plundered. A majestic clan, destroyed in a single day. How sad, how lamentable. The spectators all sighed in their hearts. Never in their wildest dreams would they have imagined that the Heavenly Fate Rankings battle would be the doomsday of the great solar Qin clan. How glorious was the Qin clan! Those who walked out from them were all dressed in luxurious robes, exuding an imposing aura. Yet now, their name in the annals of Grand Xia was about to fade away with the wind. The winner takes all, this has always been the case since ancient times. How could a war between sects be so simple? A single misstep would result in annihilation. Someone sighed. In Grand Xia, there wasn't a single power that was willing to start a war between sects so easily. Once a war was started, it would be a battle to the death. They wouldn't leave behind any future troubles for themselves. Hence, before this, the Qin clan had no qualms in their actions, and were extremely cruel to those from the Mystic Moon sect. But what the Qin clan didn't expect was that the victor wouldn't be them. In a pavilion extremely far away from the Qin clan, a silhouette clad in long robes stared in the direction of the Qin clan. His eyes were incomparably sharp, flickering with a cold light. In the eyes of this person, terrifying flames could be seen burning. He was none other than the person from the Qin clan who had fled after hearing the news. Opening his palm, he lowered his head and stared at a mysterious ancient medallion. This medallion was none other than the sacred royal medallion. In these 100 years, out of the 3 medallions, one was in the hands of Qin Fan, while the other was given to Qin Wang. Both of them had died, and their medallions were snatched away. And he was the 3rd holder of the sacred royal medallion other than Qin Fan and Qin Wang. As for the holders of the sacred royal medallion from 100 years ago, other than the youngest ascendant who returned, the others didn't return to the great solar Qin clan. Maybe they had died, or maybe they didn't have the face to return to the Qin clan. Every 100 years, the 7 grand clans of Grand Xia would each obtain 3 medallions. However, it didn't mean that one would be able to stand out from the rest. The outside world was too vast, and there were even more demon-level geniuses there. Death was something that couldn't be any more common. But every sacred royal medallion represented hope. Many of the ascendants from the 7 grand clans were people who had obtained the medallions back then. After they returned, they became the leaders of the Qin clan. Clasping his hands together, this person gripped the medallion tightly. His eyes gleamed with sharpness as his silhouette flickered, landing on the ground and slowly walking away. At this moment, the situation in the ancient kingdom of Grand Xia was the complete opposite of that of the great solar Qin clan. The Qin clan was in a state of apocalypse, with only a few silhouettes remaining. As for the ancient kingdom, it was unknown how many experts had arrived. Countless silhouettes surrounded the ancient kingdom, staring at the center of it. Over there, the entire royal palace seemed to have sunk into the ground, vanishing into thin air. In the depths of the earth, there was actually an incomparably majestic underground palace. It was said that this underground palace was the legendary royal tomb of Grand Xia, the burial ground of the ancient emperor. At the entrance of the royal tomb, there was a gigantic vermilion bird totem protecting it. The mouth of the vermilion bird was the entrance to the royal tomb, yet no one dared to casually step into it. Since this place was the tomb of the ancient emperor of Grand Xia, how could the experts of the ancient emperor allow others to disturb the peace of the ancient emperor? Most probably, there would be countless dangers lurking within, with only a slim chance of survival. The experts from the Ouyang aristocrat clan, Jiang clan, Shi clan as well as the Venerate Heavens sect have all arrived. How fast! At the entrance of the royal tomb, a group of silhouettes appeared. These were none other than the experts from the various transcendent powers. In the air, a raging wind gusted by as another 7 to 8 people arrived. These people were all wielding a puppet, and all of them were young in age. They were none other than Di Tian and the rest. These people can join forces to fight against celestial phenomenon ascendants. Back then in the Venerate Heavens sect, it was none other than them who fought against the Qin clan lord and Junyu. That young man is none other than Di Tian. It's none other than this young man who is in charge of the Azure faction together with Qin Wentian. He cultivates the same innate technique as Qin Wentian and is also proficient in the demonic divinity sacrificial transformation. It was none other than him who threatened the Pill Emperor Hall with the demonic vanquishing swordplay, forcing them to leave. The first time this young man appeared, he already dealt with the Qin clan. Another demon-level character like Qin Wentian. The hearts of the spectators sighed. Qin Wentian, the top ranker of the heavenly fate rankings, killed the Qin clan ancestor with a single sword strike. Now, he has written a new legend in Grand Xia. How terrifying! The spectators discussed. The Qin clan was the same as the Pill Emperor Hall. They angered Qin Wentian and the Pill Emperor Hall was destroyed. The Qin clan's ending was even more miserable. They were directly annihilated. It was as though this young man was someone they couldn't afford to antagonize. Chapter 465. Outside the royal tomb, although there were many experts gathered, nobody dared to be the first to enter. How powerful was the ancient kingdom of Grand Xia? The royal tomb was the burial ground of the ancient emperor. How could they allow ordinary people to profane it? Hence, within the royal tomb, every step was fraught with danger. The Ouyang aristocrat clan, Shi clan, and the other transcendent powers all gathered their disciples and ordered them to be the vanguard, entering the royal tomb to scout the way. At the same time, the clan leader of the Ouyang aristocrat clan turned his gaze onto Yun Mengyi and the others as his countenance flickered. The royal tomb was opened by these people and they obtained the 7 slaughter puppets. In that case, did they know of the dangers within the royal tomb? Let's enter. At this moment, Yun Mengyi spoke in a low voice as she stepped forward. Qin Wentian and the others didn't hesitate and followed after Yun Mengyi. When controlling the 7 slaughter puppets, the 7 of them were of one mind, there was no need to be suspicious. Bai Qing, although she didn't have a deep relationship with these people, she knew the relationship between them and Qin Wentian. Since they were siblings, there was no need for her to have any reservations. Sadly, Wentian Gij is injured and has no way to come, Bai Qing murmured. Her heart was still thinking about Qin Wentian, but she didn't know that the young man walking beside her was none other than her Wentian Gij. Qin Wentian naturally wanted to reunite with them. However, if they knew that he was Qin Wentian, although they would help him keep the secret, it wasn't impossible for him to reveal his true identity when he was in danger. If that happened, the secret of the great Nirvana immortal art would be exposed. This was something that Qing had specifically instructed them to do. Not only that, even at this moment, many people were staring at him with blazing gazes. This was especially so for those from the transcendent powers. Because, there was a high possibility that he had the immortal vanquishing swordplay on him. The might of that swordplay had been personally witnessed by many, and if it weren't for the fact that they feared the power behind him, in addition to the fact that the Qin clan had just been annihilated, there would be many who would directly act against him. On the path of cultivation, the hearts of humans were filled with treachery. He naturally understood that not everyone was like Fan Lu, Ouyang and the rest, friends of life and death with him. Qin Wentian and the rest walked towards the mouth of the gigantic vermilion bird. Yun Mengyi didn't hesitate at all, she took the lead and entered. Very swiftly, 8 silhouettes stepped into the mouth of the vermilion bird, disappearing from the vision of the crowd. Let's go. Seeing that someone had taken the lead, the crowd immediately became bolder. They slowly walked towards the mouth of the vermilion bird and entered the imperial mausoleum. A moment later, they felt as if they had passed through a vermilion bird door. The instant they walked out, they turned around and found that the door had disappeared. One could only enter, not exit. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. They clenched their fists nervously. But when they saw Yun Mengyi and the others, their countenances gleamed with sharpness. These people seemed to be extremely familiar with the secrets of the royal tomb. They raised their heads and began to observe the imperial mausoleum. Inside the imperial mausoleum, the palace gave off the feeling of a forest. It was grand and imposing, exuding an ancient sense of solemnity. However, there was also a hint of gloominess in this majesty. After all, this place was the royal tomb, a burial ground. In front of them, there was a long pathway that led straight into the distance. On both sides of the pathway, gigantic statues could be seen. These statues were all soldiers clad in armor, wielding long spears in their hands or riding on ancient beasts. They were like the guards of this palace, solemnly standing there. Although they were lifeless objects, they gave off an intense sense of danger. How can the royal tomb be a place where just anyone can enter? Yun Mengyi coldly laughed in her heart as she stared at the pathway ahead. After which, she transmitted her voice to the crowd, use the ultimate arts as a guide to pass through this pathway. Unleash the ultimate arts of Grand Xia and pass through. As the sound of her voice faded, Yun Mengyi unsheathed her sword. She danced with it as she stepped onto the pathway. The countenances of the crowd froze as looks of bewilderment appeared on their faces. Yun Mengyi was actually performing a sword dance on the pathway. Not only that, it was the heavenly swordplay. Yun Mengyi continued forward, and behind her, Fan Lu also stepped out. The blood in his body surged as a terrifying great solar bloodline erupted forth. He originally had the bloodline of the Empyrean flames in his body, and after cultivating the great solar universe art, his bloodline grew even stronger. His entire body was dyed red as he stepped out. Ouyang Guangsheng, Chu Mang, and the rest all unleashed the ultimate arts of Grand Xia as they advanced forward. Devil might gushed forth from Bai Qing as she lifted her foot and advanced forward. Qin Wentian was the last to step out. He too stepped out as a blood-colored curse imprint appeared in his palms. The blood in his body seemed to contain a miraculous energy within. It was none other than him who had activated the blood curse imprint. The 8 of them advanced forward, leaving behind expressions of hesitation on the faces of those behind them. The 8 of them had actually all cultivated the ultimate arts of Grand Xia. Unleashing their ultimate arts, what would happen if they didn't cultivate the ultimate arts of Grand Xia? The silhouettes of those from the Shi clan flickered as they stepped out, unleashing their golden dragon battle art. Similarly, they advanced forward without meeting any obstructions. Those who had cultivated the ultimate arts of Grand Xia were already extremely few in number. Now that they had all stepped onto the ancient pathway, the countenances of the remaining cultivators turned ruthless as they dashed forward with extreme speed, advancing towards the pathway. However, at the instant he stepped onto the pathway, the statues on both sides of the pathway suddenly lit up, radiating a resplendent light. Bzzz. Abruptly, terrifying spears erupted forth, sealing off the pathway in front of him. He turned his head back only to see that the pathway behind him was also sealed. His countenance couldn't help but turn ashen. After which, the bows in the hands of the statues on both sides abruptly lit up, radiating a terrifying light as they aimed at that person. A chain of arrows pierced through the air, akin to rays of golden light. That person screamed in agony as fresh blood dyed the ground red. After which, his silhouette actually dissipated into nothingness, along with his blood. The spears that sealed off the pathway vanished without a trace, the light from the statues also vanished. The ancient pathway was incomparably silent, there wasn't even the slightest sound to be heard. However, the hearts of the crowd behind them all trembled violently. This pathway was a dead end, it was only opened up for those who were proficient in the ultimate arts of Grand Xia. When they turned their heads back, they could only see an ice-cold wall with no exit. To think that there would still be people coming in to die. Since it's a dead end, why aren't there any skeletons here? Someone questioned. If they were ultimately trapped here, in that case, there should be someone who had experienced the same thing in the past. Why weren't there any skeletons here? This place is the royal tomb of Grand Xia, only members of the ancient royal clan are allowed to enter. How could they not know the secrets of the royal tomb? Naturally, they must have cultivated the ultimate arts of Grand Xia. How could they be like us, trapped here? Someone replied. Momentarily, the person who spoke earlier shut his mouth. Evidently, he understood the reason as his countenance paled. Everyone felt their hearts turning cold. That's right, the royal tomb of Grand Xia wasn't a place where anyone could enter. How could they allow anyone to disturb the peace of the ancient emperor? That woman, what a venomous heart. At this moment, a cold voice drifted over. Expressions of rage appeared on the faces of the crowd. Evidently, they were blaming Yunmengyi for not informing them, allowing them to enter here to die. Yunmengyi continued her sword dance on the ancient pathway, she naturally didn't know the curses of the others. But naturally, even if she knew, her heart wouldn't waver. The path of cultivation was extremely treacherous, the hearts of people were unfathomable. Who wouldn't want to enter the royal tomb? Even if they weren't related to each other, it was inevitable that they would suspect each other, let alone a group of strangers. If she told those people that they couldn't enter the royal tomb, would they believe her? Most probably, they would even suspect that she had ulterior motives, purposely deceiving them while entering the royal tomb alone. This ancient pathway was extremely long, and after a period of time, a door finally appeared in front of Yunmengyi. She directly stepped into it, and the others followed after her as they arrived at another location. This place wasn't as narrow as the ancient path. It was extremely wide, transforming into a square-shaped palace. Within the palace, there were many runes engraved on it. Numerous violet-colored stone pillars stood tall within the palace, and at the center of the palace, there seemed to be an ancient coffin made from a gigantic starry sky stone. It quietly floated there, and below it, there was actually a mysterious light supporting the coffin. Around the ancient coffin, there were 4 gigantic pillars, and on top of them, there were carvings of vermilion birds. In front of the ancient coffin, there was a praying mat carved from the purest astral stones. Over there was an altar that emanated an extremely dense amount of astral energy. This Yuan meteor stone is actually so pure, it must have originated from the 5th heavenly layer, or even the 6th heavenly layer. I wonder how strong the astral energy contained within it is. The hearts of the crowd trembled. At this moment, they discovered to their astonishment that these stone pillars were actually complete pieces of Yuan meteor stone, and were used to carve the inscriptions on them. How luxurious! The Yuan meteor stones in this vast palace can support the cultivation of countless experts. The higher the altitude of the Yuan meteor stones, the more terrifying the amount of astral energy they contained. However, these Yuan meteor stones were also extremely rare, and they were all meteors that fell from the 9 heavenly layers. Yunmengyi walked up and knelt on the astral praying mat at the bottom of the stairs leading up to the ancient coffin. After which, she kowtowed 9 times to the coffin, each kowtow emitting a thunderous sound. After which, she placed her palms on the diagram on the sacrificial altar as astral energy gushed forth. In the blink of an eye, the entire altar lit up, spreading to the stairs, the stone pillars, and the diagrams on the 4 pillars lit up as well. Resplendent light illuminated the entire hall, causing the entire hall to emit a dazzling radiance. And in the center of the 4 stone pillars, on top of the ancient coffin, a vermilion bird inscription slowly materialized. The vermilion bird was bathed in flames, exuding an incomparable majesty as it stared ahead. The totem of the Grand Xia Empire, vermilion bird. It's impossible for there to be life in this place. What exactly is this vermilion bird? Above the vermilion bird, a brilliant light flashed, gradually enveloping everyone. A terrifying aura radiated from the vermilion bird, as though it was extremely enraged. Why are you the only descendant of my Grand Xia clan? The vermilion bird spoke in an ice-cold voice, causing the hearts of the crowd to involuntarily tremble. Reporting to Ancestor, the Xia clan has already been annihilated for thousands of years. I'm the only descendant left. Yunmengyi's eyes shone with respect as she kowtowed once more, causing a terrifying coldness to erupt forth from the vermilion bird. Grand Xia had already been annihilated for thousands of years. Chapter 466. The coldness radiating from the vermilion bird enveloped the entire palace. Everyone felt as though their bodies were being constricted as their breathing quickened. That stifling pressure caused them to feel how powerful the vermilion bird was. Who destroyed it? The vermilion bird icily asked. The 9 grand clans of Grand Xia joined forces and betrayed us. Yunmengyi replied. Impossible. The strength of the royal clan can easily suppress the 9 grand clans. The vermilion bird coldly replied. Maybe the Grand Shang Empire played a part in this. When the last Xia emperor of my clan fell, they launched a sneak attack, wanting to destroy Grand Xia. Yunmengyi continued, her words causing towering flames of rage to erupt from the vermilion bird. My Grand Xia has actually been destroyed for thousands of years. And you are the only descendant of my Grand Xia. The vermilion bird swept its gaze over Yunmengyi. How did you survive? Why did you only come to the royal tomb now? Ancestor Xia Tianyu lived in humiliation, leaving behind descendants, all the way until my generation. It's just that for thousands of years, the royal palace of Grand Xia has always been occupied by our enemies. Even now, our enemies have been chased out of the ancient palace. I didn't forget the teachings of my ancestors and found a way to enter the royal tomb. And now, I'm here to pay my respects to my ancestors. Yunmengyi respectfully spoke. Her words caused the hearts of those behind her to tremble, especially those from the Shi clan. Their countenances turned pale. This place was the royal tomb of Grand Xia, and they were outsiders. Not to mention, they were the traitors of Grand Xia. Wouldn't coming here be equivalent to courting death? The vermilion bird was silent for a moment before asking, "Who are they?" "The 7 behind me are all my good friends." Now that the situation in Grand Xia is unstable, the descendants of the imperial astronomer prophesied that Grand Xia would soon be unified. Maybe, they are the key characters to unify Grand Xia. As for the others, they are the traders of Grand Xia and have cultivated the ultimate arts of Grand Xia. Yunmengyi slowly spoke, her words causing those people to feel a chill run down their spines. The eyes of the vermilion bird turned, landing on them. Abruptly, beams of fiery light shot out from its eyes. Instantly, those people were engulfed in flames as they screamed in agony. And in just a short moment, they were all turned into ashes, vanishing from the palace. The royal tomb requires ancestors' protection. I hope ancestor won't be angered and waste of energy. Yunmengyi kowtowed to the vermilion bird. The power of the stars here is enough to support me. I just hate that I can't leave the royal tomb. The vermilion bird stared at the 8 people before it and slowly spoke, "Since you've brought them here, I will open the door of the sovereigns for them. However, just like before, you will be sent to different places of inheritance based on your talent. Different inheritances will appear depending on your performance." "I understand." Yunmengyi nodded. The ancient emperors of our Xia clan would all open up their own inheritance gates within the royal tomb. Our ancestors would then send them to different locations according to their different talents. As for what kind of inheritance they could obtain, it would depend on themselves, how far they could walk. Yunmengyi's words were spoken to the 7 people behind her. She was telling them that this was an opportunity to receive the inheritance of the Xia clan's ancient emperor. The further they walked, the more powerful the inheritance they would receive. No wonder the Grand Xia Empire was so prosperous back then, yet the 9 grand clans were unable to uncover their greatest secret. Because, this secret was only known to the royal clan of Grand Xia. The greatest secret of Grand Xia was located right in the depths of the royal tomb. The royal tomb was the tomb of the emperors of Grand Xia. Similarly, it was also the place where the emperors left their inheritances for their descendants. Back then, every descendant of Grand Xia would have a chance to enter the royal tomb and pay their respects to their ancestors, starting the path of inheritance. Since she brought you here, I believe that you won't tell anyone about this secret. However, I still need to plant a defensive force in your memories. If someone tries to forcefully invade your memories and search your soul, this defensive force will block the soul-searching technique. Of course, if the soul-searching person is too strong, this defensive force will explode in your memories and destroy them. Are you willing to do this? The vermilion bird swept its gaze over the 8 people as it slowly spoke. The royal tomb of Grand Xia was the secret of the Xia clan. The reason why the secret of the royal tomb was not revealed even after the destruction of Grand Xia was because those who brought their descendants into the royal tomb were all core members of the royal clan. They naturally wouldn't take the initiative to betray Grand Xia. As for why the secret of the royal tomb wasn't discovered, it was because of the words spoken by the vermilion bird. Not only the ancient kingdom of Grand Xia, there were many other powerful transcendent powers that had such methods. It would naturally be best if we can defend against soul-searching. Ouyang Guangxing straightforwardly agreed. If they really reached that step, they wouldn't be far from death. The others all nodded their heads, none of them had any objections. In the eyes of the vermilion bird, an ancient imprint blazing with golden flames manifested. This ancient imprint shone with an intense light that abruptly shot out, rushing into the minds of the crowd, causing them to feel as though their memories were being protected by a golden screen of light. Okay, stand beside me one by one. Let me feel your astral perception. The vermilion bird slowly spoke. Yunmengyi took the lead, walking in front of the vermilion bird. The vermilion bird closed its claws, placing them on top of Yunmengyi's head. It closed its eyes, and layers of light flowed around Yunmengyi's body. After which, several stone pillars in the hall gradually lit up. There were a total of 81 stone pillars in this ancient hall. Yunmengyi lit up over 40 of them before the stone pillars stopped. Astral soul. The vermilion bird spoke. Momentarily, Yunmengyi released her astral soul. It's done. The vermilion bird lowered its claws, glancing at the 7 people behind Yunmengyi. Ouyang Guangsheng walked up, and the vermilion bird did the same thing to Ouyang Guangsheng. Ouyang Guangsheng's astral perception was even more powerful. His first astral soul was from the 4th heavenly layer, and he was able to light up 50 astral stone pillars. The vermilion bird nodded its head in satisfaction, not bad. After which, Fan Le, Chu Mang, Qin Zheng, Mu Feng and Bai Qing stepped forward respectively. Their astral perception was above 40, and Bai Qing's was the best apart from Ouyang Guangsheng's. Her first astral soul was also condensed from an astral soul from the 4th heavenly layer. Qin Wentian walked up as well. The vermilion bird did the same thing to him. Instantly, Qin Wentian felt his perception abruptly expanding outwards, following the guidance of the vermilion bird. Very swiftly, the stone pillars lit up one by one, and very quickly, a total of 50 stone pillars were lit up. However, this wasn't the end. An instant later, the 60th and 70th stone pillars lit up one after another, causing the vermilion bird's eyes to abruptly snap open as a terrifying light erupted forth. Not only that, this wasn't the end. When the other 4 stone pillars lit up one after another, the vermilion bird's eyes froze as it stared fixedly at Qin Wentian. All 81 stone pillars had been lit up. The entire great hall was like a starry sky, incomparably resplendent. Not only the vermilion bird, even Yunmengyi and the rest were stunned as they stared at Qin Wentian. Di Tian's talent was so terrifying. They had always known of Qin Wentian's demon-level talent. But this Di Tian, who cultivated all sorts of innate techniques together with Qin Wentian, was actually this terrifying as well. Even now, they still couldn't imagine that Di Tian was actually Qin Wentian. Because they had personally witnessed Qin Wentian in the form of a great rock unleashing the immortal vanquishing swordplay, before falling into a coma. The current them had yet to come into contact with a technique on the level of the great Nirvana immortal art. They had never even heard of such a technique before. Who would dare to think that the two of them were the same person? Your astral souls. The vermilion bird stared at Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian fell silent. He could conceal his appearance, but if he released his astral souls, it would directly tell everyone that he was none other than Qin Wentian. Upon seeing Qin Wentian's silence, the eyes of the vermilion bird flickered. After which, it opened its beak and spat out a beam of light, enveloping both it and Qin Wentian. I will keep this a secret for you, but I need to see your astral souls first before allowing you to enter the ancient Emperor Gate. Not only that, even if you enter the ancient Emperor Gate, if you release your astral souls during battle, I will still know. The vermilion bird spoke to Qin Wentian, not concealing anything from Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian hesitated for a moment. This vermilion bird was the guardian of the royal tomb of Grand Xia, and there was a high possibility that it was an important character of Grand Xia. It wouldn't lie to him. Nodding his head, Qin Wentian released his 4 astral souls, 3 from the 5th heavenly layer, and 1 from the 6th heavenly layer. Done. The vermilion bird nodded. Qin Wentian retracted his astral souls as the screen of light dissipated. The body of the vermilion bird gradually landed on top of the coffin, pressing its palms downwards. Instantly, behind it, on the walls of the palace, a door slowly opened as an incomparably gigantic statue appeared. This statue was of an incomparably imposing middle-aged man. He wielded a thunder god's saber in his hands, and was clad in lightning armor. On his shoulder, there seemed to be a gigantic lightning serpent obediently lying there. On his head, there was a crown. This is one of the ancient emperors of my Xia clan, the Tyrant Emperor. Among the ancient emperors of our Xia clan, his strength can be ranked within the top 5. When he was alive, he was unrivaled in Grand Xia. Back then, a great war erupted between Grand Xia and Grand Shang, with the Grand Shang Empire assassinating the princess of Grand Xia. In a fit of rage, the Tyrant Emperor slaughtered his way into the Grand Shang Empire, annihilating the Grand Shang Emperor and slaying the 5 kings. But in the end, he still managed to return to the royal tomb of Grand Xia with his last breath, where he passed away in meditation. After that battle, both sides suffered great losses. The vermilion bird's voice was solemn as it narrated the story of the ancient emperors. After which, it turned to Ouyang Quangsheng and Chu Mang. The thunder god Slash was created by the tyrant emperor. The two of you, enter the gate of the tyrant emperor. Many thanks, senior. Ouyang Quangsheng bowed to the vermilion bird. Right. Chu Mang respectfully bowed as well. Following Ouyang Quangsheng and Chu Mang, they entered the ancient gate beside the tyrant emperor's statue. After which, the gate closed. The sharp talons of the vermilion bird pressed down on the coffin once more as another ancient emperor statue appeared. This ancient emperor had a demonic countenance, similar to that of a handsome young man, terrifying to the extreme. This is one of the ancient emperors of my Xia clan, the Blood Emperor. He's the same as the tyrant emperor, dominating the heavens and earth. From the moment he was born until the Grand Xia Emperor abdicated, he only took 100 years. The blood curse imprint was created by him. You, enter the gate. Chapter 467. The ancient emperors of the Xia clan were extremely famous during the era of Grand Xia. Tyrannical Emperor, Blood Emperor were the titles they used when they ascended to the throne, not their cultivation bases. Chu Mang and Ouyang Quangsheng both entered the Tyrant's Gate, walking on the path of inheritance. Mu Feng had entered the path of inheritance of the Blood Emperor. After which, the gaze of the vermilion bird landed on Fan Lo as it continued, your astral perception can be considered ordinary among these people. However, your mental energy is at the peak. Coincidentally, among the ancient emperors of Grand Xia, there's one whose mental energy is exceedingly outstanding. His combat prowess is also exceedingly high. You have to grab hold of this opportunity and obtain the complete inheritance. After speaking, the vermilion bird pressed down with its talons as another statue appeared. This statue had eyes so deep that one couldn't even see the bottom of the abyss. Just a single glance was sufficient to cause the hearts of those who stared at it to tremble. Fan Lu walked towards the statue. The vermilion bird stared at Qin Zheng. The mandate of space has always been an outstanding ability. It's strong in both offense and defense, and has an advantage when fleeing. You are the same as well, you have to grab hold of this opportunity. After speaking, its talons pressed down once more. Qin Zheng bowed to the vermilion bird as he walked towards the statue. The vermilion bird glanced at Bai Qing. Your will is extremely tough, and your body is filled with yin and devil energy. It's truly not easy for a weak body like yours to persevere until now. Your path will be extremely difficult. Among the ancient emperors of Grand Xia, the chaotic Sky Devil Emperor is an oddity. He has always been alone since young, and even after dominating Grand Xia, he didn't want to become the Xia Emperor. However, he still chose to enter the royal tomb. The vermilion bird's talons pressed down, and Bai Qing bowed to it as she walked towards the statue. Very swiftly, only Qin Wendian and Yunmengyi remained in the palace. Qin Wendian turned his gaze onto the vermilion bird as he asked, Senior, did the ancient emperors of Grand Xia and the inheritances they left behind in the royal tomb all die? Being able to become an ancient emperor of Grand Xia, there was no doubt that they possessed terrifying strength. According to Fairy Qingmei, back then, the pinnacle of Grand Xia was at the peak of celestial phenomenon. How could they die so easily? Not only that, once they reached that realm, they would no longer be obsessed with the throne of Grand Xia. They would choose to walk the path of cultivation instead. The vermilion bird stared at Qin Wendian, but it didn't reply. It was contemplating which inheritance should Qin Wendian enter. This person's astral perception and astral soul were the most terrifying out of all of them. His talent was undoubtedly extremely high, and he definitely had the highest chance of obtaining the complete inheritance of the ancient emperor. After all, back then when the descendants of the royal clan of Grand Xia entered the royal tomb, they had to pass by this person. Those who came here today were all extremely outstanding. In addition to the inheritance path he had chosen for them, these people all had a chance to obtain the complete inheritance. Qin Wentian's hope was the greatest. Qin Xia Emperor, Qin, Kingus Chen, Qin, Emperor of the Qin Xia sect, Qin, Emperor, Tian. Yunmengyi's eyes flickered, she naturally understood the vermilion bird's meaning. Glancing at Qin Wentian, her eyes flickered as she transmitted her voice to the vermilion bird, extremely crucial. From her point of view, although Di Tian's identity was mysterious, he cultivated the same innate technique as Qin Wentian. In fact, Qin Wentian even imparted the demonic divinity sacrificial transformation to him. From this, one could see the relationship between the two of them. Di Tian was like Qin Wentian's shadow, he could replace Qin Wentian to control the Azure faction. Not only that, given Di Tian's talent, he was naturally extremely important. The vermilion bird's eyes landed on Qin Wentian as it continued, the difficulty of obtaining the inheritance of the ancient emperors of Grand Xia is exceedingly high. If you wish to obtain the complete inheritance, you might even lose your life. Regardless of you, or the other 6 who entered, or even the descendants of Grand Xia, if you give up halfway, although you wouldn't die, you would only be able to obtain a portion of the inheritance. What are your ambitions? My ambition is to obtain the complete inheritance. Qin Wentian replied. If I choose the most difficult and most dangerous path for you, would you dare to take it? The vermilion bird asked again. Qin Wentian's eyes flickered as he replied, the most difficult path, the most dangerous path. In that case, the inheritance would naturally be the strongest. Why wouldn't I dare? Since this is the case, you might encounter all sorts of unimaginable situations. Prepare yourself. Go on. As the sound of the vermilion bird's voice faded, its sharp claws slammed into the coffin. Behind the vermilion bird, the doors of the palace actually opened. There was no statue, only a gate. Qin Wentian's eyes flashed with sharpness. He bowed slightly and walked towards the ancient gate, directly stepping into it as his silhouette vanished from sight. Within the palace, only Yunmengyi was left. After Qin Wentian left, the vermilion bird stared at Yunmengyi. Based on your strength, I'm afraid you still have a long way to go if you want to revive Grand Xia. Why did you bring them here? I can tell that these people are all extraordinary characters. Their countenances are filled with arrogance, and I'm afraid they aren't something you can control. If they were just friends, why would you dare to take such a risk? I don't wish to become the Xia Emperor. I only wish for my enemies to die, and for Grand Xia to be unified. At that time, wouldn't it be the revival of Grand Xia? Yunmengyi knelt, please forgive me, ancestor. The reason why I brought them here is because there's a core character that can influence all of them. That person is the crux of the matter. The crux of the prophecy of the descendants of the venerable celestial sect, is it that person who appeared earlier? The vermilion bird asked. Yunmengyi shook her head, it's not that person. There's someone more outstanding than that person. The flames in the vermilion bird's eyes flickered, feeling shock in its heart. Di Tian was the one who ignited the 81 stone pillars, illuminating the entire ancient palace. I think so. Yunmengyi nodded her head. That person controlled the demonic divinity sacrificial transformation, transforming into a great rock in the clouds. With a cultivation base at the 2nd level of Heavenly Dipper, he overturned the demonic divinity sacrificial transformation and destroyed a celestial phenomenon with a single sword strike. Right now, he's currently in a coma due to heavy injuries and has yet to appear. Not only that, the first 3 astral souls he condensed were all from the 5th heavenly layer. Yunmengyi added. Upon hearing her words, the eyes of the vermilion bird flickered. What astral souls did he condense? Heavenly Hammer, Great Dream, Demon Sovereign. Yunmengyi replied. That person is in a coma due to heavy injuries. What's the matter? Are you certain? The vermilion bird asked again. Yes, it's the matter today. I borrowed the 7 slaughter puppets to participate in this battle, and with the exception of that maiden, I formed a group of 7 slaughter puppets. Yunmengyi slowly continued, not only that, this young man's background is extraordinary. I'm afraid that even if he unified Grand Xia in the future, Grand Xia wouldn't be able to retain him. The vermilion bird acted as though it didn't hear her words. After a moment of silence, it nodded its head lightly. At this moment, it understood. You should go as well. Work hard. The sharp talons of the vermilion bird pressed down, causing the statue to materialize. Yunmengyi stood up and stepped into the ancient pathway, leaving only the vermilion bird behind. Reverse demonic divinity sacrificial transformation art. His avatar is actually the same as his original body. This young man is extremely demonic. The vermilion bird murmured. After hearing Yunmengyi's words, it naturally knew that Di Tian was the person Yunmengyi was referring to. However, since it had already promised Qin Wendian to keep this a secret, it naturally wouldn't tell Yunmengyi about this. But it didn't know why Di Tian would hide this from others. It could only hope that Yunmengyi wouldn't make a mistake in her judgment. When Qin Wendian stepped through the gate, he could clearly sense spatial energy. Extremely intense spatial fluctuations sent him to another dimension. At this moment, Qin Wendian discovered that he was in a world of ice and snow. The vast land was covered in a blanket of white, so cold that it caused one to shiver. On the path of inheritance, there would definitely be many trials. I wonder how high the difficulty of the trials would be. Qin Wendian mused as he stepped out, leaving behind clear footprints on the snow-white ground. At this moment, Qin Wendian halted his steps. He felt that the ground beneath his feet was soft and soft. After which, a terrifying coldness erupted forth, causing Qin Wendian's body to turn into an ice sculpture. Pang! Stellar transposition erupted forth, Qin Wendian retreated behind him. His countenance flashed with sharpness as he stared ahead. The thick layer of snow actually started to move. Over there, a silhouette actually crawled up. It was a person clad in snow-white robes. Even his skin and face were as white as snow. My perception actually didn't detect his existence. Qin Wendian stared at this person. This person laid in the snow, as though he was one with it. There's actually someone who came here. The person said, as if he was surprised. Then, he grinned, revealing his white teeth. For thousands of years, only a few people dared to come here. I didn't expect that after so many years, there would still be people who dared to come here. Senior, what's the test for this stage? Qin Wendian asked. Test? Do you know that if the rules allow it, I will kill you? The snowman stared at Qin Wendian and grinned again, giving off a sinister feeling. Then, may I ask Senior, what are the rules? Qin Wendian asked again. The strength of this person was unfathomable. He was definitely not someone Qin Wendian could defeat. Since the vermilion bird had sent him here, there shouldn't be any test that he couldn't complete. Your cultivation level? The snowman asked mockingly, as though he finally had someone to vent his anger on after so many years of loneliness. Heavenly Star Border Stage 2. Qin Wendian replied. I will suppress my cultivation level to the second level of Heavenly Star Border. If you can destroy me, I'll consider it as you passing. The snowman laughed, his words causing Qin Wendian to furrow his brows as a cold smile appeared on his face. Suppress your cultivation level to the second level of Heavenly Star Border? Fine. Qin Wendian replied. Stepping forth, astral light erupted forth as he executed stellar transposition. At the same time, the keening of a sword could be heard as a resplendent sword slashed out, directly slashing down on the body of the snowman. However, Qin Wendian only saw the snowman turning into a pile of snow as it gradually melted away. It wasn't a human at all. Kacha! A sharp and clear sound rang out. Both of his legs condensed into ice. He was actually sealed in ice. Qin Wendian lifted his feet, wanting to move, yet he discovered that the power of the mandate of ice had already seeped into his legs. The power of the mandate of ice froze the blood in his legs, causing him to be unable to even circulate astral energy. This. Qin Wentian's gaze froze. Not only his legs, even his arms and body started to freeze. The second level of Heavenly Star border doesn't have any restrictions. A cold voice drifted over with the wind, causing Qin Wentian's heart to tremble. He had just stepped onto the path of inheritance and the test was already so difficult. Chapter 468. This frost energy was extremely terrifying. Once it seeped into his body, it would be able to freeze his blood and astral energy. If his internal organs were to be frozen, he would surely die. His opponent wasn't joking with him. Under the rules, Qin Wentian would definitely kill him. As he thought of this, the blood in Qin Wentian's body seethed. He activated the Fiend transformation art as a terrifying demonic aura permeated the air. Shatter! With a roar of rage, the frost on his arms shattered as the silhouette of a great rock manifested on his body. Crackling sounds rang out as the frost energy continued to extend upwards. Fiend transformation art. Demonic chi gushed forth from Qin Wentian as a terrifying energy circulated around him. Abruptly, his arms were like a pair of wings as they abruptly spread open. At the same time, his body transformed into a great rock. However, this great rock was far inferior compared to the great rock in the demonic divinity transformation art. It was much smaller, only tens of meters long. Despite transforming into a great rock, the frost energy was still present. His wings flapped ferociously as beams of sword light slashed out, landing beneath his feet. Opening his mouth, an incomparably sharp gigantic heavenly astral sword was stabbed into the ground. The keening of the sword rang out unceasingly, destroying all the ice and snow in the area. However, at this moment, the snowflakes on the ground danced wildly in the air, drifting towards the great rock's body. In the blink of an eye, the great rock's entire body was covered in a layer of snow. Bzzz. The great rock soared through the air as his astral nova flew back. The keening of the sword rang out unceasingly, revolving around his body. It was as though the surroundings were filled with a terrifying sword might, capable of ripping apart all the drifting snowflakes. His sharp gaze swept downwards as he abruptly moved. He transformed into a resplendent beam of light, instantly appearing on the ground. The heavenly astral sword pierced out as the keening of the sword keening could be heard. Countless sword beams danced in the air, slicing apart the snowflakes. The speed of the great rock was extremely fast. Since he couldn't find the snowman, he could only destroy all the snow in this space. However, at this moment, the snow on the ground began to move rapidly, gathering towards the same direction in a frenzy. In a short moment, a snow mountain appeared. This snow mountain stood tall on the ground, and it was still growing rapidly. All the snow in the sky was about to condense on top of the snow mountain. Qin Wentian glanced at the snowy mountain as the great rock soared through the air. The heavenly astral sword radiated with the will of a king as it slashed out, landing on the gigantic snowy mountain, causing the void to crack. Terrifying shockwaves spread out in a frenzy and several large cracks appeared on the surface of the snowy mountain. However, the cracks rapidly healed up. At the same time, one gigantic ice blade after another shot out from the snowy mountain towards the great rock. Qin Wentian hurriedly retreated. He saw with his own eyes that the snowy mountain was still growing. It was now a 1,000-meter-tall snowy peak. Rumbling sounds could be heard as the snowy mountain started moving. Arms and legs grew out of it, and a face appeared. It was none other than the snowman from before. In the blink of an eye, the snowy mountain transformed into a snowman that was 1,000 times larger than before. With a single glance at Qin Wentian felt as though his soul was about to be frozen. Initially, I wanted to play with you slowly. Who would have thought that you would be so untactful and actually want to use your sword to destroy the ice and snow? The gigantic snowman coldly spoke. After that, he stepped forth, causing the earth to tremble. He directly stretched out his palms as an incomparably gigantic snow-white palm imprint directly shot towards the great rock. The palm imprint didn't move, but the ice-sealing intent of the snowman had already descended. The great rock shuddered as he instantly retreated. The palm imprint slammed into the air, causing thunderous rumbling sounds to echo out. This space is extremely vast. You can keep hiding, but you will be trapped here forever. As for me, it doesn't matter. I've already stayed here for far too long, I don't mind waiting with you. The gigantic snowman mocked, his words causing Qin Wentian's countenance to turn extremely unsightly. The snowman didn't break the rules, he had suppressed his cultivation base to the second level of Heavenly Dipper. This was why he had the ability to dodge. But even if he was at the second level of Heavenly Dipper, his gigantic body was almost indestructible. How was he supposed to fight against him? His body is formed from ice and snow. Unless I destroy all the ice and snow, I won't be able to kill him. Qin Wentian mused. The power of his bloodline began to ignite as a towering demonic aura erupted forth. The terrifying aura caused his cultivation base to break through to the third level of Heavenly Dipper. The power of my bloodline is my trump card. Although my cultivation base is at the third level of Heavenly Dipper, my cultivation base is indeed at the second level. Qin Wentian stared at the snow giant. He didn't expect that at the first checkpoint, he would have to rely on the power of his bloodline. Such a feeling was extremely unfavorable. How terrifying would the difficulty of the later checkpoints be? So what if you're at the third level of Heavenly Dipper? The snow giant coldly spoke. However, at this moment, the body of the great rock reverted back to that of a human. After which, terrifying scales covered his body as the will of the mandate of demons was unleashed to the extreme. His entire body was covered with incomparably tough dragon scales, as though he was clad in a demonic armor. His martial spirit erupted forth as he brandished his astral nova greatsword and advanced forward. If the current Qin Wentian was in the external world, it would be extremely easy for him to kill someone at the fourth level of Heavenly Dipper. I truly want to see how strong of an attack your body can endure. Qin Wentian's speed abruptly increased, akin to a gust of wind. But as he continued forward, the pressure exerted by the mandate of ice and snow on him grew increasingly stronger. His body started to be sealed in ice, and in fact, the mandate of ice and snow permeated his body, wanting to freeze everything in his body to death. Die! Qin Wentian's silhouette vanished from sight. Wielding the astral nova greatsword with both hands, he directly appeared above the gigantic head of the snow giant. The astral nova greatsword directly pierced into it as his will of mandates erupted forth. The gigantic head of the snow giant was instantly destroyed, and the gigantic greatsword pierced into it. Bzzz. A violent palm imprint of ice blasted towards Qin Wentian. However, Qin Wentian's palms trembled as he abruptly slashed out with the astral nova greatsword, directly piercing into the body of the snow giant. At the same time, he used stellar transposition to evade the attack. With the other astral nova in his hands, he abruptly smashed it towards the back of the snow giant. Boom! A gigantic force blasted outwards as shockwaves gushed forth, causing cracks to appear. Qin Wentian stabbed out with his palm, executing the heaven-breaking finger. Boundless sword light converged into a terrifying vortex, gushing into the body of the snow giant. As the finger landed, Qin Wentian was forced to retreat explosively. The coldness of that attack was too strong, it was enough to freeze him to death. Although he was far away from the snow giant, Qin Wentian's countenance was extremely solemn. He stared ahead as the astral nova within the body of the snow giant continued its slaughter, causing the body of the snow giant to tremble unceasingly. Finally, with a thunderous boom, the snow giant collapsed. Boundless snowflakes drifted about unceasingly in the air as the tiny snow giant once again appeared in the air, staring at Qin Wentian. Your strength isn't bad. The snow giant suddenly laughed. Congratulations, you can now proceed to the next level. However, if you want to pass the next test, it's basically impossible. You'd better be mentally prepared. As the sound of his voice faded, his body also transformed into snowflakes, drifting about in the wind before vanishing. However, at the location where he disappeared, a stairway leading to another dimension appeared in front of him. It was unknown where the snowflakes came from, but they soon covered the entire area. Qin Wendian stretched out his hand, allowing the snowflakes to land on his palm, exuding a slight chill. His gaze followed the stairway upwards. From the words of the snow giant, it seemed that the next test would be even more difficult. The vermilion bird had chosen the path of the tyrant emperor for Ouyang Guangsheng and Chu Mang, the blood emperor for Mu Feng, and the chaotic sky devil emperor for Bai Qing. Now, what path did it choose for him? If he could pass all of them, what would he gain? Qin Wendian sat cross-legged in the snow, allowing the snowflakes to land on him as they gradually enveloped him. After igniting the power of his bloodline, he would feel somewhat weak and needed a good rest. Numerous Yuan meteor stones appeared in his palms as he absorbed the astral energy within. After several days, Qin Wendian stood up and walked to the bottom of the flight of stairs. Inclining his head, he didn't hesitate as he ascended the stairway upwards. The instant he stepped out of the stairway vanished as he appeared in another dimension. This place was a forest of swords. Bzzz. An incomparably terrifying sword intent instantly locked onto Qin Wendian. His countenance turned ashen as he inclined his head and stared at his surroundings. In the air, there were actually many swords floating about, each of them exuding a sword might that was sufficient to kill him. This forest of swords was a forest of swords, and every single one of them was filled with such swords. Qin Wendian stared at the countless swords floating in the air. They were like a forest of swords, swaying with the wind. However, the tips of the swords were all pointed at him, gleaming with a terrifying sword light. It was as though as long as he made the slightest movement, only death would await him. This place is a forest of swords. If you choose to back out now, I will send you back. A voice seemed to originate from the void. Qin Wendian inclined his head and saw a silhouette slowly walking over from the vast forest of swords. Although this person was walking slowly, the feeling he gave Qin Wendian was that every step he took was filled with sword intent. It was as though this person was formed from a sword, fusing as one with this forest of swords. How do I count as passing? Qin Wendian asked. I will only tell you after you make up your mind. But let me remind you first, it's still not too late to give up now. Once you start, you will die 9 out of 10 times. The other party slowly spoke. Qin Wendian inclined his head and stared at the countless swords in the air. Indeed, as long as these swords moved, he would die for sure. But now, he didn't even know what the test was. How could he give up just like that? This wasn't something Qin Wendian would do. Since he chose the most difficult path, how could he back out now? In the future, how would he question himself? What is the test? Qin Wendian asked again. That person's expression was as calm as ever. After that, he slowly spoke, if you can walk out of this forest of swords, you will pass the test. If you can't, you will die of old age here. As the sound of his voice faded, he turned around and slowly walked out. At the same time, a voice drifted over, let me remind you, if you take a step forward, the swords will kill you. Qin Wendian clenched his fists as his heart trembled. How could he pass this test? It seemed impossible, but if he moved, he would die. Chapter 469. Qin Wendian watched as that person gradually left. He couldn't help but shout, why didn't the swords kill you? Since I am a sword, why would the swords kill me? That person calmly replied, causing Qin Wendian to fall into deep thought. Since I am a sword, why would the swords kill me? He was a sword. Qin Wendian stood at his original position, not daring to move. The sword intent permeated the air, pointing at him. As long as he moved, the swords would kill him. This feeling was extremely mysterious, he could clearly feel it. Since that was the case, how could he walk out of this sword forest? Closing his eyes, Qin Wendian drew in a deep breath, calming his emotions. He knew that at this moment, he couldn't lose his composure. If he lost his composure, he would die. This path of cultivation was the most difficult one. Since he chose this path, he could only walk through it. If not, he would die. There was no other choice. He had to have the conviction to move forward. Since I am a sword, I am a sword. Qin Wendian murmured, pondering over the words of that person. This must be the key. If he was a sword, he would become one with the sword forest. The swords of the sword forest wouldn't point at him. Suddenly, a powerful sword intent gushed forth from Qin Wendian. This sword intent seemed to want him to become one with the swords of the heavens. But at this moment, he suddenly felt that the murderous sword intent in the surroundings grew increasingly intense, as though it wanted to pierce through the air and kill him. This caused Qin Wendian's countenance to darken. He instantly retracted his sword intent, his countenance extremely unsightly. This path wouldn't work. If it was so simple, how could it be called the strongest path of cultivation? The first layer of the space of snow tested his combat prowess. In that case, the second layer of the sword forest tested his comprehension. If he wanted to walk out of the sword forest, he had to become one with the swords. Just like the snowman he saw in the lower layer, lying in the snow, becoming one with the snow. It was also like the person who walked out of the sword forest earlier, giving off the feeling that he was a sword. However, at this moment, all the swords were pointing at him. How could he calm his heart and comprehend? Qin Wendian took another deep breath, trying to calm himself down. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, looking at the swaying swords in silence. The sword was sharp and straight. The quality of the sword was to press forward and sweep away everything in its path. By observing the sword, one will know the sword. Qin Wendian thought. He stood there with his hands clasped behind his back. He stood there with his back straight as he silently stared at the swords before him, observing everything about them. Qin Wendian's body was filled with sword sounds, as if he was going to cry with his sword. Several days later, the swords on Qin Wendian's body did not stop. All the swords were still pointing at him, filled with killing intent. However, Qin Wendian had a subtle feeling that the killing intent had weakened a little. Although it was very little, it was still an improvement. To learn the sword, to comprehend the sword. Qin Wendian murmured in his heart. He imagined himself to be a sword, standing in this forest of swords, as if he was one with any of the swords in the forest. The swords hummed, he hummed. The swords whistled, he howled. The swords slept, he slept. Within the forest of swords, the weather actually changed, the seasons changed. Rain poured down, yet the swords remained the same. Qin Wendian remained unmoved. Even when the rain fell on him, his body continued to emit sword hums, becoming one with the rhythm of the swords in the surroundings. The rain grew heavier and heavier, with the force of a downpour. Qin Wendian's robes were completely drenched, yet he stood there like a sword as the sword intent radiating from him dispersed the rainwater. The sword hums in the forest grew louder and louder. Qin Wendian's body also emitted sword hums, resonating with the swords. Finally, the rain calmed down. The sword hums continued, but at this moment, Qin Wendian felt that the hostility of the swords in the forest had weakened a little. This caused Qin Wendian to be overjoyed. It seemed that the path he chose was not wrong. If he had a chance to walk out of the forest of swords, he would have to continue moving forward. Time flew. Qin Wendian observed the swords and comprehended them. He seemed to have become one with the swords in the forest. He wanted to find what that person had said. Since I am a sword, why should the swords kill me? In the forest of swords, a gust of wind blew. Qin Wendian had already forgotten himself. Right now, he was a sword in the forest of swords. The wind blew, but he still stood there, emitting sword hums. He didn't move, he hummed along with the swords. 3 months passed. Qin Wendian closed his eyes and stood there. Right now, he was like a real sword, humming along with the swords, swaying together with them, swallowing their sword intent together. Outside the forest of swords, a figure stood there, staring at Qin Wendian's actions. A sharp light flashed in his eyes. This young man was extraordinary, his comprehension was so terrifying. Most probably, within 3 years, he would truly have a chance to walk out of here. Half a year passed. Qin Wentian seemed to have completely transformed into a sword, fusing with the Forest of Swords. The swords no longer targeted him, this caused Qin Wentian to be pleasantly surprised. Sincerity was the only way to become a sword. Qin Wentian stepped out, like a sword whistling through the air. However, at the instant he stepped out, a terrifying sword might gushed over, pointing at him. Qin Wentian's countenance paled. He retracted his foot as his heart trembled. At this instant, he felt a sense of defeat, as though he had fallen into an iceberg. Sincerity was the sword, honing a sword for half a year. Could it be that he was wrong? The sword forest still didn't approve of him. It only allowed his swords to emit sword hums, but it didn't allow him to leave. Was I wrong? In that case, how should I walk out of this forest? Qin Wentian asked himself. The hardest test was which path he should take. If he couldn't walk out, would he truly be trapped in this forest forever? When he thought of this, Qin Wentian couldn't help but feel extremely vexed. Half a year, he used a total of half a year, and in the end, he discovered that he was wrong. Time was extremely precious to him. Wasting half a year without any results, he found it extremely hard to accept. For a total of 3 days, Qin Wentian was in a daze within the Forest of Swords. Those swords were all pointing at him, causing him to feel a sense of disgust. He wanted nothing more than to destroy them. And when he revealed this state of mind, the killing intent radiating from the swords grew even stronger. When Qin Wentian sensed the killing intent, his heart trembled. After that, he mumbled in a low voice, "Who would have thought that as swords, you guys would be so sensitive, able to distinguish between friend and foe, able to differentiate between joy and evil. Seems like I was wrong." As the sound of his voice faded, he closed his eyes again, letting go of the grudge in his heart as he became one with the swords. Gradually, the intense hostility he felt earlier vanished. Sincerity is the sword. If my heart is directed towards the sword, I will naturally be able to infect the other swords. Qin Wentian silently mused. His heart was directed towards the sword, extremely kind, extremely sincere. This time around, he only used a month to transform into a sword, becoming one with it. The swords in the forest no longer had any intent to target him. However, Qin Wentian understood that what he did wasn't enough. He had to forget his identity, forget everything. There was no sword in his hands, no sword in his heart. Time flowed by, Qin Wentian continued to stand there, as though he had forgotten everything. He had forgotten who he was, he had forgotten that he was a sword. However, his entire person seemed more and more like a true sword. Sword intent, sword grade. A gentle breeze blew. Within the Forest of Swords, there were no longer people, only swords. At this moment, Qin Wentian suddenly had a feeling that everything around him was a part of him. The entire Forest of Swords was a part of him. A smile appeared on Qin Wentian's face. His eyes opened as he took a step forward. This step was filled with sincerity and confidence. With a single step, all the swords in the forest seemed to be moving together with him. Qin Wentian knew that his comprehension of the sword had entered a whole new realm. He also understood that only by stepping into this realm would he be able to walk out of the Forest of Swords. Not only could he walk out of the Forest of Swords, he could even control them. Stretching out his hand, Qin Wentian touched a sword as a smile appeared on his face. That sword seemed to be able to sense Qin Wentian's emotions as it actually started to throb in joy. What a pity, in a true battle, there aren't so many powerful swords that I can control. Qin Wentian laughed. After which, he waved his palms and instantly, the swords in the Forest of Swords whistled through the air, hovering above Qin Wentian's head as a terrifying sword might engulfed everything. The Forest of Swords vanished, transforming into a gigantic ancient sword that floated above Qin Wentian's head. That silhouette appeared once more, staring at Qin Wentian with a bright light in his eyes. Who would have thought that you would be able to succeed so quickly? You didn't even use a year's time. That silhouette clearly had a look of admiration in his eyes. Such comprehension abilities caused him to be startled. Qin Wentian bitterly smiled as he spoke in a low voice, I didn't expect this either. It's just a single level and I was already trapped for a year. In that case, how long would it take to ascend further? That silhouette had a smile that was not a smile on his face as he stared at Qin Wentian. Do you know the results of this 1 year? Not only did your mandate of sword melody break through, you've also comprehended a terrifying sword-type innate technique. Are you still not satisfied? Qin Wentian naturally understood what the silhouette meant. His mandate of sword melody had indeed broken through to the transformation boundary of the 3rd level. Just one more level and his mandate of sword melody would be at the perfection boundary of the sword melody boundary. He also understood that exiting the sword forest meant that he had comprehended an extremely tyrannical innate technique. What is the name of this innate technique? Qin Wentian asked. Although you've comprehended it, I'm afraid you've only seen a fraction of it. It's better for me to bestow upon you the complete version of the innate technique. That silhouette laughed as he waved his hands. An instant later, a page of the innate technique flew towards Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian stretched his hands out to receive it. This page was golden in color, and there were a few words engraved on it, 7 Annihilation Swordplay. Many thanks, Qin Wentian replied. There's no need to thank me. You've already passed the first 2 checkpoints. However, the path ahead isn't going to be easy. If you can pass it, it means that you're only a step away from success. That silhouette smiled as his silhouette gradually dissipated, vanishing from sight. The entire space became empty once more. In front of Qin Wentian, another flight of stairs appeared, leading to the next level. If he could pass the next checkpoint, he would only be a step away from success. Although the path to the ancient Emperor realm was incomparably difficult, there weren't many checkpoints. However, the difficulty of each checkpoint was extremely terrifying. Just take this sword forest for example. If it wasn't for the fact that his will was extremely resolute, how could he have exited the sword forest within a year? If his state of heart was in chaos, he might not be able to find the exit even after 10 years. And if his state of heart was in chaos, he might even have the thought of forcefully barging his way out. Chapter 470. Qin Wentian didn't leave immediately. Instead, he sat down cross-legged. During this 1 year, although his cultivation base didn't change, his state of heart had improved tremendously. This was especially so for his mandate of swords. Retrieving the 7 Annihilation Swordplay, Qin Wentian's will sank into it as his heart trembled. The strength of this swordplay was even stronger than the heavenly swordplay of Grand Xia. However, the 7 Annihilation Swordplay wasn't listed as one of the 9 ultimate arts of Grand Xia, but the heavenly swordplay was. Qin Wentian didn't know the reason, but he knew that if one's comprehension of the sword wasn't deep enough, it would be impossible for them to cultivate this sword art. He used a year's worth of time to observe, understand, and transform into swords. Finally, he was able to control all the swords in the sword forest, and only then did he manage to comprehend the 7 Annihilation Swordplay. Not only that, based on the difficulty of this trial, his comprehension speed should be considered one of the fastest. For ordinary people, they might have to spend more time, 5 years, 10 years, or even a lifetime to comprehend it. Comprehension was extremely profound, it wasn't something that could be accumulated over a long period of time. Hence, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that 5 years, 10 years, or even a lifetime wasn't an exaggeration. Sometimes, if one couldn't comprehend it with a single thought, they would never be able to comprehend it. Even if the 7 Annihilation Swordplay was listed as one of the 9 ultimate arts of Grand Xia, there wouldn't be many people who would choose to cultivate it. The 7 Annihilation Swordplay, 1 step, 1 finger, 1 thought, 1 kill. When the 7 slashes landed, even ghosts and gods would be slain. Qin Wendian closed his eyes and began his cultivation. There wasn't a hint of sword intent emanating from him, he had already stepped into a brand new realm. Occasionally, when his sword intent leaked out, the sword might would erupt forth in an instant, causing people to tremble in fear. After silently cultivating for a period of time, Qin Wendian could feel his cultivation base rising bit by bit. His sword-type Yuanfu had already transformed into a terrifying vortex as it absorbed the astral energy from the constellations. His sword-type astral nova grew more and more corporeal, as though it was only a step away from breaking through to the next level. Today, Qin Wendian stopped his cultivation. Following the staircase in front of him, he ascended to another level. The entire space was filled with demonic beasts. A terrifying demonic aura surged towards him. Qin Wendian's countenance turned ashen. The cultivation bases of these demonic beasts were all at the second level of Heavenly Dipper, but as far as the eye could see, there was no end to them. Even if he continued to slaughter them, it would still be sufficient to exhaust his energy. Roar! Terrifying roars rang out as those demonic beasts lunged towards him. Qin Wendian's countenance stiffened as he stepped out, killing with each step he took. In an instant, the sound of splattering rang out as the demonic beasts lunging towards him were instantly destroyed, not even their bones remained. However, the other demonic beasts continued to lunge towards him. This. Qin Wendian's countenance turned ashen. With an intention of his will, 4 astral novas appeared simultaneously as he slaughtered his way out. Everywhere they passed by, the demonic beasts were all annihilated. This was especially so for the king's sword, it was his strongest astral nova, capable of annihilating everything in its path. Qin Wendian advanced step by step, and with every step he took, a demonic beast would die. Such slaughter continued for 1 day, 2 days, there seemed to be no end to it. After 7 days, Qin Wendian was completely exhausted. He could only inscribe divine inscriptions and stay at his original location, preventing the demonic beasts from getting near him. Staring at the boundless space ahead, he couldn't help but to suspect, could he really exit this space? If it wasn't for the fact that he was proficient in divine inscriptions, he would have died here sooner or later. Outside the royal tomb, a year had already passed. During this year, Grand Xia was much quieter than before. Naturally, other than the Pill Emperor Hall, the situation was the exact opposite. Before the Heavenly Fate Rankings battle, the Pill Emperor Hall was silent, while the other transcendent powers were all making preparations for the upcoming storm in Grand Xia. As for the reason for the silence, it was naturally because of the battle that shocked Grand Xia after the Heavenly Fate Rankings battle. In that battle, 3 celestial phenomenon ascendants fell. Not only that, they were all ascendants from the Great Solar Qin clan, and there was even an ancestor at the 3rd level of celestial phenomenon among them. The Great Solar Qin clan, which had been the hegemon of Grand Xia for a period of time, was annihilated, becoming the 2nd transcendent power destroyed by Qin Wendian after the 9 mystical palace. This battle told Grand Xia that transcendent powers could also be destroyed. And once they were destroyed, they would be uprooted from the roots. For a period of time, the younger generations of the transcendent powers all became much more low-profile when they roamed outside. The 9 mystical palace and the Great Solar Qin clan were right in front of their eyes. The reason why they were annihilated was because they had once bullied a young genius who had yet to mature. During this year, Junyu of the Pill Emperor Hall summoned a few powerful ascendants from Grand Shang. The Hua clan and Wang clan all formed an alliance with him, and started to hunt down Qin Wendian and Fairy Qingmei. As long as Qin Wendian didn't die, the Pill Emperor Hall wouldn't be at ease. However, Qin Wendian and Fairy Qingmei's subordinates had long since disappeared from Grand Xia. Even when the Celestial Lake Palace was located in the Demon Mountain City, they couldn't find any traces of them. It was as though they had completely vanished. Grand Xia was simply too vast. How difficult would it be to find them who had intentionally concealed themselves? Outside the royal tomb, those from the Pill Emperor Hall were also stationed there. Not only the Pill Emperor Hall, there were many transcendent powers who had sent their experts to guard the area. Occasionally, they would also send experts to scout the area. However, those who entered had never returned, and there was no news of them at all. Ouyang Guangsheng and the others who had entered the royal tomb back then had also vanished without a trace. Because of this, there were even ascendants who directly attacked the royal tomb. To their astonishment, they discovered that this majestic royal tomb was actually an incomparably sturdy supreme treasure. Attacks from the outside had no effect at all. There were even people who speculated that those who entered the royal tomb would never return. Qin Wentian continued his slaughter. After killing for an unknown period of time, how many demonic beasts he had slain, and how many Yuan meteor stones he had used up, he finally arrived at another location. However, he discovered that what awaited him next was actually an endless horde of third-level Heavenly Dipper demonic beasts that were even stronger than him. He had no other choice but to continue killing. Such torment made him feel as though he was about to go crazy. However, he had no other choice. He could only give it his all, hoping that he would be able to exit the royal tomb as soon as possible. Qin Wentian silently mused that if it wasn't for the fact that he was proficient in the Tao of divine inscriptions and formations, he would have long since died. This was truly an impossible test. How long more would this test take? He had no idea, he could only continue advancing forward. Forgetting the passage of time, Qin Wentian felt as though he had fallen into a trance. Until one day, he finally saw a majestic royal tomb. Qin Wentian was filled with joy as he slaughtered his way in. However, he discovered that he had once again returned to the place where he came from, and saw the vermilion bird. This. Qin Wentian's countenance paled as he stared at the vermilion bird. This is the path you have chosen, the most difficult path. Everything you've done was for naught. What you obtained was the tempering you've gained through these years. The vermilion bird stared at him as it calmly continued, they have long since left. There are guards outside, let me send you out. Qin Wentian's countenance turned incredibly unsightly. Could it be that all these years had been for naught? A powerful surge of energy gushed forth from the vermilion bird, enveloping him within. After which, he felt his silhouette blurring as he was flung away. When he reappeared, he was already far away from the ancient kingdom of Ginkgo. Upon seeing so many people surrounding the ancient kingdom, he could only stealthily flee. Qin Wentian's silhouette flickered as he left this place. Because of the connection between his two bodies, he managed to find Fairy Qingmei and the others. In the Sky Harmony city of Chu, he saw Qin Chuan and Sis Qin Yao. This caused him to be extremely happy, as though some of his pain had been alleviated. Fairy Qingmei and Qing were both here. Not good. At this moment, Qin Wentian sensed that something was wrong. After which, Qin Wentian inclined his head and discovered a terrifying aura gushing over. Jun Yu was leading an army of celestial phenomenon ascendants, and they directly unleashed their constellations, enveloping this entire space. We're being followed. Qin Wentian's heart pounded as his countenance turned as white as paper. After which, Jun Yu spoke, who would have thought that we would meet in such a small city so far away. But today, all of you shall die. As the sound of his voice faded, astral light cascaded downwards as Qin Chuan and Qin Yao screamed in agony. No! Qin Wentian roared in rage, his eyes bloodshot. After which, the celestial phenomenon ascendants encircled Fairy Qingmei. Run! Fairy Qingmei shouted. Qin Wentian didn't move at all. Unknowingly, Qing was already standing in front of him. It was as though this had always been the case. In the Qin clan of Sky Harmony City, numerous silhouettes died. Fairy Qingmei let out a howl of despair as she died. Qin Wentian clenched his fists as fresh blood seeped out. He once again used the demonic divinity sacrificial transformation, transforming into a demon. But this time around, the celestial phenomenon ascendants directly rushed over, unleashing terrifying attacks that heavily injured him, not giving him any chance to escape. Go! A screen of light appeared in Qing's hands. That screen of light was filled with the power of space as it blasted into Qin Wentian's body. In the blink of an eye, his silhouette vanished. Qing simply stared at him. Her eyes were as cold as ice, but at this moment, a smile actually appeared on her face. But after that, he was directly killed by the other experts, turning into ashes. No. That smile was etched into his mind. Qin Wentian let out a howl of despair. When he reappeared, he was already teleported outside of Chu. He laid on the ground, his eyes were empty and his heart felt like it was being pierced by a knife. He wanted nothing more than to die. Dead, he had caused the death of his father Qin Chuan, caused the death of his sister Qin Yao, caused the death of Qing. He was bewildered, desolate, as though he had gone mad. His consciousness blurred as the pain he felt was unbearable. He didn't want to face it, he wanted to escape. Was this his life? Why did things turn out like this? He wanted to ask the heavens, why was this happening? At this moment, in a bamboo forest 1,000 miles away from the spirit continent, the bamboo swayed gently in the wind. Qing quietly stood there, resembling a beautiful celestial maiden as she stared into the distance. Behind her, Qin Wentian's silhouette quietly lay there. A year had passed and Qin Wentian had already gradually recovered. He cultivated in his dreams, absorbing astral energy and was on the verge of recovery. Qing. At this moment, a voice broke the silence of the bamboo forest. Qing turned and stared at Qin Wentian in bewilderment. After which, she only saw a silhouette rushing over and directly hugging her. This caused Qing's entire body to stiffen as the bamboo in her hands fell onto the ground. Her head rested on Qin Wentian's shoulder as she stared ahead in a daze. An instant later, she blinked her eyes as an expression that she had never seen before appeared on her face. "You're hurting me." Qing spoke in a melodious voice. Qin Wentian had used too much strength. The melodious voice startled Qin Wentian awake. He retreated and looked at Qing, who was standing in front of him unscathed. He drew in a deep breath. Luckily, it was just a dream. This dream was too terrifying. "What's wrong?" Qing's voice was still ethereal and melodious, extremely pleasant to the ears. She noticed that Qin Wentian was frowning. "My other body has fallen into a devilish state. That's an extremely terrifying dreamland. My mind is connected to his, yet I have no way to wake him up." Qin Wentian spoke in a low voice. Because their minds were connected, he soon knew what the other body was experiencing. He also knew how terrifying the devilish state of the third dimension was. Chapter 471. Qin Wentian naturally understood this. In truth, after Di Tian stepped into the third level, he only experienced a single thought. But this thought actually caused him to feel as though many years had passed. It was like a dream, a life of its own. Such a method, or innate technique, was simply unimaginably powerful. I've once entered a dreamscape before. Dreamscape experts are able to create dreams, but what Di Tian experienced wasn't merely a dream created by others. He even knew that he had another body, and knew that Fairy Qingmei had her own consciousness. But even so, he still couldn't extricate himself from the dreamscape. Qin Wentian's expression turned solemn. Qin Wentian furrowed his brows. The most difficult part of the ancient path was the fact that he had two bodies, yet he still couldn't wake up. One could very well imagine how terrifying this was. Di Tian could only depend on himself, no one could help him. This was a test of his will. If he couldn't wake up, there was a very high possibility that he would be trapped in that nightmare forever, consigned to eternal damnation. You are connected to his mind, yet he actually couldn't sense your existence? Qing asked in a low voice. Qin Wentian nodded, that's exactly why it's so terrifying. While he was in that dreamscape, his control over his will was so great that even the connection between us was suppressed. I wonder if it was a dreamscape or an illusory technique. Qing's eyelashes fluttered. After which, she stared at Qin Wentian. Her clear eyes caused Qin Wentian's eyes to flicker as he asked, "What's wrong? Does that have anything to do with you hugging me?" Qing'er asked, her words causing an awkward smile to appear on Qin Wentian's face. He still wanted to change the topic, yet he didn't expect Qing'er to be so astute. Staring at her pure and flawless eyes, Qin Wentian could only bitterly smile. In Di Tian's dreamscape, something that made me extremely afraid happened, so, oh. Qing'er interrupted Qin Wentian's words. She directly turned away, causing Qin Wentian to be unable to see the changes in her expression. However, Qing'er didn't seem to be angry. Gazing at the bamboo forest, Qin Wentian drew in a deep breath. When he thought of the pain Di Tian had experienced, he silently swore in his heart, "I will never allow such a life to happen." As he thought of this, Qin Wentian clenched his fists tightly. At this moment, he suddenly didn't want to clash head-on with the Pill Emperor Hall. He could disregard himself, but he had to consider his family and friends. He didn't wish for anything to happen to any of them. "Let me bear all of this," Qin Wentian silently mused. Although Jun Yu's strength wasn't very strong, Fairy Qingmei had told him about the royal sacred sect and the three empires before. If things were really like what happened in the dreamscape, Jun Yu was able to summon external forces. Even if he had the immortal vanquishing swordplay, wouldn't that mean that he would be slaughtered the moment he slashed out? Even if he killed Jun Yu, he might feel a momentary sense of satisfaction. But what about the subsequent rage? He definitely had to take revenge for Qingcheng, but he wouldn't allow anything to happen to the people around him. "Qing'er, I plan to cultivate for a period of time before I leave Grand Xia," Qin Wentian spoke. The dream he had with Di Tian caused him to change his mind. He wanted to go out, he wanted to become even stronger, possessing strength that no one in Grand Xia could contend against. At that time, only then would he have the qualifications to protect everyone. "Oh." Qing'er replied. She didn't seem to have much of a reaction. However, Qin Wentian was already used to this. "I will go as well." Qing'er spoke again, her words causing a smile to appear on Qin Wentian's face. Although Qing'er wasn't a talkative person, Qin Wentian had long treated her as one of the people closest to him. Every time he encountered life-threatening danger, she would always appear before him, never missing. He still remembered when he transformed into a great rock, only Qing'er accompanied him silently. She told him, "I won't allow you to become a demon." For the sake of this simple sentence, Qin Wentian didn't know what price she had to pay to obtain the great Nirvana immortal art. He had asked Qing'er a few times but she wouldn't reply. However, Qin Wentian himself had never given up on it. The great Nirvana immortal art was a heaven-defying secret art. How could it be so easy to obtain it? Creating two identical bodies with the same level of talent. If it was obtained by an extremely powerful character, he would be able to create two supreme experts. If this secret art was made known to others, Grand Xia would definitely go crazy over it. Let alone Jun Yu, even the powerful royal sacred sect would tremble in fear. Qing'er had instructed him not to reveal this secret art. Hence, even if it was to Fan Lu and the others, Qin Wentian didn't reveal this secret art. Qin Wentian went back to his cultivation. Di Tian's body had gained many insights and he could directly absorb them. However, he needed some time to stabilize the foundation of this body. As for Di Tian's body, he wasn't as relaxed as Qin Wentian. Right now, he was still struggling in the endless pain of the devil barrier. Amidst the devil barrier, Qin Wentian was still madly sprinting through the demonic beasts' forest in Chu. Dead, all of them had died. Qing'er had given him the last hope of survival, yet she herself had died. That final smile of hers, he would never be able to forget it. It resounded in his mind, causing him to feel a piercing pain in his heart. He didn't dare to face it, he didn't dare to imagine that scene. He hated himself. Why did things turn out like this? Qin Wentian roared to the heavens. It was unknown how long he had been running, but he eventually fainted in the forest. When he woke up, he was in a daze. His hair was in a mess, and he resembled a madman. He basically couldn't feel that this was an illusion. It was too real. It was like a lifetime, a cycle of reincarnation. He had no way to extricate himself from it, he couldn't even sense anything. Would a person who had experienced his entire life doubt that this life was fake? Clearly, it was impossible. Self-blame and remorse lingered in his heart. Qin Wendian continued sprinting, and after an unknown period of time, he arrived at a village in Chu. The people in the village only knew the simplest of cultivation methods. In fact, they weren't even stellar martial cultivators, but ordinary cultivators who absorbed the yuan qi of heaven and earth. Their strength was at the lowest level, yet they lived in peace and tranquility. He couldn't help but feel a little envious of the lives of the villagers. If he, Qingsheng, Qing-er and the others could also live in such a village, living a carefree life, how wonderful would that be? Carefree, standing aloof from worldly affairs. Qin Wendian felt that he was extremely fatigued. He wanted to rest. In the village, he met a young girl. With just a single glance, Qin Wendian was deeply attracted to her. This young girl actually resembled Mo Qingsheng in the past. Pure and flawless, beautiful and moving. She was like the most beautiful flower in this world, radiating the light of the sun. When this young girl saw that he was injured, she decided to take care of him. Very quickly, the two of them got to know each other. Qin Wendian was infatuated with the life in the village, no longer willing to venture out. It was as though he was fleeing from something. He was afraid that he would recall those nightmares. Every time he thought of them, his heart would feel as though it was being sliced by knives, as though countless arrows were piercing through his heart. He gradually chose to forget everything in the past. In that case, he wouldn't have to face them again. Gradually, he had a new life. He became an ordinary person, living a peaceful and tranquil life. It was as though he was willing to live like this forever. However, all this happiness was shattered. Jun Yu's men found the village, and it just so happened that he wasn't there. He stood on a mountain peak far away and personally witnessed the destruction of the village. He saw the arrival of celestial phenomenon ascendants, and he hated himself for being powerless. He hated himself, he wanted to flee again, to leave this place. No. Qin Wendian let out a hysterical howl. He inclined his head and stared at the sky as his gaze abruptly turned incomparably sharp. Qing, I won't die. Father and sister Qin Ya won't die as well. Everything is fake, all fake. Qin Wendian howled madly. He wanted to question his life. He could sense that there was a mysterious force that was driving him crazy, forcing him into a state of eternal damnation. I won't flee anymore. Qin Wendian sat on the mountain peak as his gaze turned incomparably resolute. If this is a real life, I'm willing to bury it with my own hands. As the sound of his voice faded, Qin Wendian willed as a sharp sword appeared in front of him. Qin Wendian gripped the sharp sword in his hand, and with no hesitation, he directly pierced it into his own chest. Instantly, a heart-wrenching pain assaulted his senses. Qin Wendian lowered his head, staring at the fresh blood flowing out. How could this be fake? This was his life, how could it be fake? If this life is real, Qin Wendian, am so cowardly and weak. What face do I have to continue living in this world? Qin Wendian calmly laughed, as though he was enlightened. He no longer cared about life and death. I want a new life, a different life. Even if I have to be sliced into 1,000 pieces, I will still end this life, regardless of whether it's real or fake. As the sound of his voice faded, his sword pierced into his heart. Such pain almost caused him to fall unconscious. However, the smile on Qin Wendian's face still remained. He roared, "Do you still want to stop me from ending this sinful life? Who are you exactly? How can you be so strong that you can trap me in this life forever?" As he spoke, numerous sharp swords appeared in the air. Qin Wendian closed his eyes and roared in anger. In an instant, countless sharp swords flew towards him and pierced into his body. Millions of swords pierced through his heart, but he didn't regret it. This was his obsession. He wanted to end this sinful life. How could he, Qin Wentian, live such a lowly and cowardly life? If this life was real, then he would die. Millions of swords pierced through his body. Qin Wentian slowly closed his eyes. At this moment, everything seemed to have disappeared in an instant. Everything returned to tranquility. In the vast space, a silhouette quietly laid there. This silhouette was none other than Qin Wentian. His eyelashes moved as he opened his eyes. His eyes were still filled with determination and persistence. That unbearable life, even if it's just a dream, I will still end it. Qin Wentian murmured as he sat up. As expected, it was all in vain. Is this the test of the third level? Qin Wentian felt a sense of loss in his heart. He actually didn't feel the slightest bit of joy. This life was so unforgettable that it made his heart ache. Although he knew that it was fake, he still couldn't let go of it. It was too real. It was so real that it felt like he was experiencing another life. It was so real that even if a sword pierced into his heart, he still couldn't extricate himself. This was the most difficult test. The first test, combat strength, was the easiest. The second test, comprehension, was extremely difficult. The sword forest could kill. The third test, willpower, faith, life. This test was too terrifying. It was so terrifying that even the current Qin Wentian felt his hair standing on end. Luckily, everything had ended. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.